Parents demand I cancel my wedding for sister's engagement, but the truth about her cheating changed everything. Engaged to my fiancé Jake, 30 million. I, a 28-year-old lady, have been for roughly 8 months. Up until last week, when my parents shocked us, our October wedding was scheduled and all was going according to plan. For background, Mia, 25F, our younger sister, has always been the golden child in our family. She has been seeing Tom, 26 million, her lover, for around 2 years. In practically every sphere of our existence, my parents have always showered Mia with royal care. Though I hate to sound negative, I have always felt as though hers dominates my successes. Mia was a cheerleader while I was a straight-A student playing on the volleyball team back in high school. Her achievements always seemed to eclipse all mine. Not to get me wrong, cheerleading merits just as much respect as any other sport, but would it have killed my parents to exhibit the same fervor for my events? I grew used to my absent parents and learned to expect almost little from them. I thus cut myself off from Mia, though deep down I knew it wasn't her responsibility. My immature self blamed Mom for everything. My viewpoint altered only in college, when I met Jake, the love of my life. He let me see that I deserved just as much attention as everyone else and was deserving of affection. Jake showed me that every one of us is unique in our own right and that, should someone not value my accomplishments, well, that is their loss. I also realized that it was unfair to hold Mia totally responsible when our parents were clearly in charge. I thus resolved to try to rebuild whatever sisterly relationship we still had. I started letting her know she could talk to me about anything and checking up on her more often. She first hesitated naturally, but she soon grew more at ease sharing with me. We discussed practically anything, regardless of its silliness or gravity. Though our tastes and paths of life were different, I was glad our connection was getting better gradually. We seemed to be at last the sisters we ought to have been all along. Mia knew first when Jake proposed to her. Telling me she couldn't wait to help arrange my wedding, she was as eager as I was. Everything seemed ideal at that point. I was therefore really taken aback when my mother called last Wednesday. The call began innocuously enough. Mom inquired about wedding preparations, which was odd given her previous lack of enthusiasm. I ought to have seen something was wrong. She finally got right to the point after a few minutes of small talk. Mia and Tom were getting engaged. I started to be delighted for my sister as soon as those words emerged from her mouth. Better than this, what could be? Then I noticed Mom had stated, planning to get engaged, which threw me off. Mom said Mia had told her Tom had been hinting at proposing when I asked her what she meant by that. He had done all the other usual things, asked about her ring size, advised her to get a new outfit, and told her. Although these were rather clear indicators, Mia always had a tendency of romanticizing everything and exaggerating events to make them appear more than they really were. I wanted Mia not to have her expectations skyrocketing only to be let down. When I asked Mom whether she was absolutely convinced Tom was proposing, she answered boldly. That would have marked the end of the call, but another surprise was approaching, one I would not be pleased about. My mother asked me to call off our wedding since Tom and Mia were apparently engaged. I let out a gasp. Though I must have misinterpreted, I asked her to clarify. No, she was dead serious. For 10 months I had been planning. She wanted me to call off the wedding Jake had proposed. We had waited this long since we wanted the wedding of our dreams and refused to compromise on anything. Deposits for the caterers and other suppliers had already been laid down. Not to mention the inconvenience of rearranging things, moving everything back a year would entail losing a large sum of money. What had descended upon Mom and Dad was unknown to me. When we were short on money, they had volunteered to cover the venue. I assumed this was because they were at last interested in my life. Looking back, it seemed like they did it to challenge Jake's parents. But I was too delighted at the time to pay attention to their hidden agendas. Wait, though, this was not even the worst of things. You haven't heard the rationale behind my planned delay of my wedding for Mia's expected engagement. Mom clarified that Mia wanted to be the center of attention for a full year, complete with announcements on social media and engagement pictures. I could not understand at all. Who loses money over something as flimsy as social media and calls their sister off from her wedding? Promising not to post anything about my wedding online, I tried to argue with Mom, but she claimed they would withdraw all the money they had promised for the wedding should I refuse to postpone it. Their lovely daughter was an attention seeker, hence at this time they were virtually blackmailing me. This was ludicrous and unfair, I told my mother. We debated for some time, her arguing that I was being thoughtless of Mia's sentiments and selfish. What about my feelings? I asked repeatedly. Still, I received no meaningful response. She responded simply that they wouldn't pay for the venue should I proceed with the wedding. I got furious. All my life, I gave things up for Mia's sake. Now, when I was at last ready to experience the day of my dreams, That too was being robbed from me. Out of pure annoyance and rage, I did something I never would have done. I contacted Mia's fiancé, Tom, to let him know something about Mia he didn't know. The four of us, Jake and I, Mia and Tom, went on a double date some years ago when everything was good. One of those few times when we all had time to hang around together. I recall being quite content. We laughed, told stories, and for once everything seemed ideal. Mia and I excused ourselves to the bathroom to freshen at one point throughout the evening. Mia handed me her phone to hold as we corrected our makeup so she could wash her hands. A text message suddenly sprang up on the screen. It came from someone called Mike wondering whether they might get back together. My heart still missed a beat. Though I heard Mia had dated someone some years ago, I felt he was no more relevant. Not sure I could resist asking, "Who's Mike, and why is he asking to meet again?" Mia started to spin right away. She dismissed it, believing it was nothing, just some old acquaintance extending outreach. Still, I could see her eyes ablaze with dread. I questioned once more whether something was developing between her and Mike. She said she had some texting back and forth, but she insisted it was not major. She shrugged her eyes and replied lightly, "Tom didn't need to know, it's nothing," when I inquired whether Tom knew about this. Tom seemed to be a nice man totally loving Mia. Though I couldn't get rid of the uncomfortable sensation, I let it pass since Mia later on told me she was no longer corresponding with her ex. Right then, as Mia was trying to rob me of my bliss, my thoughts went crazy. I lay it all out when I phoned Tom, roughly following the text I had seen that day. And should that not be sufficient, I advised him to monitor his girlfriend. Looking back, I realized this was sort of improper, not the sort of truth I should have been imparting to Tom, of course, but the way I did it. But already it was too late. I spoke with Tom 2 days ago, and then Mom called. Just say I was glad I wasn't in front of her. She was yelling like a crazed person, as though a tragedy had hit. Her comments really impacted me as I had made a major error. Tom apparently told Mia they needed to talk when phoning her. Mia got all ready even though she was about to be engaged, but when she at last arrived at the location, Tom was quite irate. He inquired whether that was accurate and reiterated what I had said. Mia first denied it, but she grew angry when Tom wanted to see her phone, telling him he should believe her. Tom split from Mia at last. Mom and Dad never seemed likely to pardon me for this. Mom yelled at me, and I could hear Mia berating me in the backdrop. I kept apologizing, saying I only did this because they insisted I call off my wedding. I told them I had worked very hard on it. Dad's ruling then was that he was taking back the money they had set aside for the venue. I felt as like I had lost everything, my parents, Mia, and any chance for a marriage at that same instant. Given what had happened, I knew Jake would not be pleased with me either. When I attempted phoning Mia to have a conversation, she didn't respond to my calls or texts. At the time, Jake was on a business trip, hence he was not aware that our wedding was under risk, partially because to me. Though it wasn't entirely my fault, the stress was intolerable and I felt bad for damaging Mia's relationship. I at last told Jake everything when he returned from his trip. He was quite helpful and encouraged me that we would work things out together. It relieves me. He helped me see that I ought to have done it even earlier, as being honest was the correct thing to do. Regarding the wedding, Jake and I decided to proceed even if it meant lowering expenses. We began generating ideas for financial savings. We contacted relatives and friends, outlining the circumstances and requesting assistance. Unbelievably, one of Jake's pals came to save us. He came upon us at a classy but reasonably priced location via one of his contacts. Given the current situation, we simply have to delay the wedding somewhat more, which is quite okay with me. I was attempting to stay in touch with my parents throughout this. Looking back, I'm not sure why I did this. At the time, I was afraid of being let down. I was living with guilt. Still, they were obstinate, refusing to show up for my wedding if it proceeded as scheduled. The wedding was still under preparation, and despite all the challenges, everything began to fall together. Sadly, many of my family RSVP'd that they would not be going or responded little at all. I could guess the news had gone without having to be Sherlock. One of my aunts told me Mom and Mia had depicted me as a soap opera villain who lied to undermine her sister's happiness and could not accept it. They even changed the story, saying Mia was already engaged and preparing to wed, but I later got engaged to take the front stage. Ignoring me was one thing, lying about my character took effort. By now I was exhausted. After all that had happened, I couldn't look and feel my best for a wedding. Simultaneously, I struggled to let my parents define me as they had throughout their lifetime. They accused me of being envious and cruel, attributing Mia's life destruction to me. Mia, on the other hand, was in ruins. She hadn't spoken to me since the incident, hence even though I knew what I did was appropriate, I felt awful. So, I'm asking you. Am I the a-hole for not postponing my wedding and informing Mia's fiancé of her cheating? Update. I published a few days ago, and the reaction has been really strong. Unbelievably, my parents began talking to me, but not for the reasons you might guess. They insisted that I apologize to Mia and somehow sort things out with Tom. Should I fail, they even threatened to have me disowned. Through all of this, Jake has been rather encouraging, telling me we did the right thing and we should concentrate on our forthcoming wedding. But at last Mia got back to me. Furious and devastated, she accused me of destroying her life and undermining her happiness out of spite. The talk was challenging. She wasn't open to hearing me try to explain my perspective. She persisted in arguing, regardless of what she had done, I had no right to meddle in her relationship. I lost my cool and asked her who gave her the right to believe she could influence my wedding plans that had been in place long before she was almost engaged. She hung up before I could even bring up the lies Mom and she had been telling about me. Meg, a childhood acquaintance I hadn't heard from in years, called me out of the blue when word of the family strife spread like wildfire. After moving out for college, I had disconnected from Meg, and our only means of contact was social media. But Mia had kept in touch with her for a bit longer. Their friendship reached into their early 20s. Meg also disclosed another startling story concerning Mia's adultery, one that happened around a year ago. Meg's 25th birthday celebration was attended by Mia without her then boyfriend Tom, who presumably was on a trip. Meg saw Mia growing more flirty with various male visitors, including her boyfriend, as the evening progressed and practically everyone was intoxicated. Meg first dismissed it as Mia's usual manner. She had always been a natural flirt. Meg knew, though, she hadn't seen Mia or her partner for some time as the celebration drew to an end and guests started to leave. Red-handed together in another room, they were caught. Given Mia and Tom had been dating 2 to 3 years at the time, this was very embarrassing. The episode split Meg and Mia and destroyed their friendship. When Meg learned about everything, she assumed I should know that Mia did nothing by mistake. She had become accustomed to this conduct and had somehow always gotten away with it. This fresh material really surprised me. Mia's dishonesty, I came to see, was not a one-time error but rather a habit. I asked Meg only one favor. Could she kindly forward this news to Tom herself? I was acting for a cause. When my fiancé Jake visited Tom, he was not doing well. Though he didn't say it, I'm sure he was also blaming me for what I had told him. He was second-guessing everything. Better still if someone else than me delivered this terrible news. I also wanted to avoid feeding the story that I was jealous of Mia, hence I didn't want to do this myself. Tom wanted to meet personally to go over things as soon as he received word from Meg. I accepted, expecting for some sort of conclusion or at least clear the air. Tom clearly was in shock from all that had transpired when we met at a neighborhood coffee shop. Meg's disclosure came to him like yet another wave, yet it was welcome to at last know the truth. Tom related how his split from Mia turned out. Mia was right to believe Tom intended to pop the question to her. Following our talk, he challenged Mia about the cheating, and she finally came clean. Though crushed, he valued my candor. He claimed it was preferable to know the truth now than to learn later, maybe following marriage. Tom said he had thought something was awry in their relationship for some time but couldn't pin it down until I phoned. We spoke for a lengthy period during which Tom revealed he intended to set aside time for personal healing and life review. Though it hurt, he appreciated me for having the guts to tell him the truth. Knowing I had done the right thing by being truthful with Tom, this chat brought me closure. Still, things with my family have not gotten better. My parents still support Mia. They think I was out of line and must make apologies. Focusing just on Mia's pain and neglecting the fact she cheated, they cannot seem to understand why I did what I did. Friends and relatives who learned about the circumstances have also been quite helpful. Many expressed shock at the way my parents behaved and praised me for defending what was right. Though I have a mixed bag of feelings, I am appreciative of the help from people who see my viewpoint. I'm trying to keep concentrated on the good and keep wedding planning underway. Despite the threats from his parents, Jake and I have decided to carry out our plans. We have changed the budget and are working to create the wedding unique without their financial support. Though I know the drama is not over, I am resolved to stick to my position. I refuse to allow Mia's behavior or the inclination of my parents define my existence anymore. I have to give my future with Jake top priority and my happiness. Hey, everyone. Every moment that passes makes my life seem to get more convoluted. About 4 days following my initial update, events changed dramatically and unexpectedly. Just as I felt the situation could not get worse, it did. Trying to concentrate, I was at work when Jake called urgently. Panicked, he told me to head straight home. Fuming something horrible, I rushed back. When I got here, Jake seemed obviously upset. He handed me a note that had dropped under our door. It came from a lawyer standing in for my parents. Over the consequences from Mia's failed engagement, they were threatening to sue me for emotional suffering and slanderous remarks. I was astounded. My own parents were suing me. The letter explained how my actions had destroyed Mia's reputation and brought her great emotional suffering. It called for a public apology, a retraction of my remarks on Mia's adultery, and a sizable payback in money. To be as nasty as possible, my parents had stretched every limit. My phone buzzed as I went over the letter. Mia was the one calling constantly. At last, looking for some answers, I took up Mia's voice carrying a mix of desperation and wrath. Saying I had destroyed her life and she had nothing left, she screamed at me. She said she had lost her work since Tom had informed colleagues and mutual acquaintances of hers about her adultery. The word had gone like wildfire, and she was today the target of rumors and criticism. She was deemed problematic, which resulted in her termination. Having my parents send me that legal fear, I felt Mia got what she deserved. She was inconsolable even though I tried to reason with her, stressing that she had to own her actions. Claiming that I had always wanted to see her fail, she charged me with being envious and bitter. The chat made me feel forlorn and exhausted. The rest of the evening, Jake and I went over our choices. Although we couldn't let my parents pressure us into compliance, we couldn't afford to get caught in a legal fight with them. This legal fight would simply mark the nail in the coffin, as I believe they knew we were already juggling our wedding budget. I contacted a lawyer for help the next day. The circumstances stunned him, but he reassured me our case was strong. He advised us to compile proof of Mia's adultery and how it affected her relationship to Tom. Should my parents carry out their threats, he also cautioned us to get ready for a counterclaim. All of this was going on when I got another unplanned call, this one from Tom's mother. Having heard about the circumstances, she wanted to thank me for guiding Tom toward the truth. Tom was devastated, she remarked, but he was glad to learn before committing himself for lifetime. She also said Tom intended to start again in another city. Her call provided a minor solace among all the turmoil. It let me realize that by being honest, I had done the right thing even with the instantaneous fallout. Though they may act as outrageously as they wanted, my parents and Mia would remain in the wrong. That weekend, things took yet another drastic turn. Unexpectedly showing up at our residence were my folks furious. They insisted on talking with me. Though Jake tried to calm them, it soon turned into a shouting contest. While my mother wailed and begged me to mend things with Mia, my father claimed I had destroyed the family. Should I fail to meet their expectations, they reiterated their threats to cut me off financially and go on with the lawsuit. I stayed put, not cowering into compliance. I told them I would not be sorry for speaking the truth. Mia's actions have consequences. My parents stormed out at the end of the confrontation, resolved to start the case. The next several days were a haze of emotional upheaval and legal discussions. Though Jake and I tried to concentrate on our wedding preparations, the tension was too great. Extended family members who had heard about the circumstances started messaging us. Some offered support while others attacked my behavior. Although Jake didn't deserve all this drama, I really detested dragging him through it, but I was also appreciative of his unflinching support. In among all this, Meg, the childhood friend who had informed me of Mia's past infidelity, sent me an unexpected note. Should my parents want to take legal action, her offer to submit a statement regarding what had happened at her party may be very important proof. Meg's encouragement and the data we were compiling helped me to begin to see hope. Although it was obvious that this struggle was far from finished, I resolved myself to stick to what was right. As I am working on it, I also want to thank you all for being my support network during this period. Though it hasn't been simple, you have clearly shown me direction. I will see you folks a little. Hello, everyone. After several more days, the issue has gotten quite hot. Mia and my dad insisted on getting together personally to go over everything. Jake and I consented, believing this encounter could at last provide some clarity and closure. We agreed to get together in our place so we might manage the surroundings and steer clear of a public display. There was clear tension in the air as my parents and Mia showed up. When they sat down, I could see the expectation in their eyes. Though I had no intention of backing down, they most likely assumed I would be apologizing and begging for forgiveness. I began with tackling the elephant in the room. My parents and Mia looked perplexedly, obviously not expecting this. I informed them, I understand why everyone is here today, but before we go any further, I want to make one thing clear. I'm here to lay out the facts. I inhaled deeply and started making my point. I began with the couple months ago. I questioned Mia if it wasn't true that she handed me her phone during our double-date dinner and that I found she was chatting to Mike, her ex-boyfriend, when she was in a very committed relationship with Tom. She said she made a one-time error, but we both knew it wasn't accurate. Mia moved uneasily in her seat, her face pallid. I carried on, opening a folder loaded with proof. She confirmed that Mia had been found cheating with her boyfriend when I told her I had talked with Meg, who threw the party a year ago. This was a behavior trend, not a one-time error. I turned over a written statement Meg sent. Mia's parents and I looked at it, their expressions changing from uncertainty to shock. Still, that was only one thing. I also brought out more proof. Text exchanges between Mia and Meg in which Mia admitted to cheating and pleaded with Meg not to tell Tom. These timestamped signals were unambiguous and devoid of uncertainty. On the table I arranged the printed messages. Though this time it appeared more toward Mia than it did me, my mother gasped and my father's face became red with rage. At last, I turned to Tom and said in a letter, he spoke about how he approached Mia following our talk and how she finally admitted. He also detailed the emotional toll her adultery took on him and how it affected his choice not to pop the question. My parents found no words. Unable to dispute the overwhelming proof, they fixated on the paperwork before them. Tears welled in Mia's eyes, but she said nothing, clearly understanding the seriousness of the matter. I then addressed the lawsuit. Although my parents had threatened to sue me for emotional suffering and slander, based on the facts it was abundantly evident that what I had said was accurate. They lacked legal justification for their posture. Actually, if they went after this, I had a strong case for a counterclaim. The space was quiet. Clearly surprised and adjusting to the reality of the circumstances were my parents and Mia. Knowing that I had at last advocated for myself, I felt relief. For the last time, I told Mia I did this because it was the proper thing to do, not out of spite or jealousy. Mia had consequences for her actions. It was time for her to own them. Regarding my wedding, my message was straightforward. Either with or without their approval, everything was going forward as scheduled. We wouldn't allow someone to destroy our happiness. Jake and I would be getting married. Rising to indicate that the session was over, I hoped this would be a turning point for all of us. That brought me closure and I left the room. Though I am aware that difficulties lie ahead, I feel for the first time in a long time under charge of my own life. Although my parents and Mia can proceed with their case, now they know I will be squarely facing them and there is no good outcome for either of us. The encouragement of our friends and relatives keeps Jake and I forging ahead with our new life. Though the road to recovery with my sister and family will be long and challenging, we are ready to travel it together. Eventually, defending myself and acting morally offered a sense of tranquility I had been lacking for so long. Looking ahead, Jake and I know we are stronger since we confronted these obstacles squarely. Without the recommendations and encouragement in the comments, this would not have been feasible. All of you and your tales have taught me so much. Thank you, then farewell. Dad favored my sister but was rejected. I chose my brother to walk me down the aisle and witnessed karma hit him hard. Dad wanted to take my sister down the aisle first, but she chose our stepdad, so he declined to walk me down the aisle. Dad is crying now and pleading with me to let him. Although I've never been a particularly vindictive person, I do enjoy it when karma is presented in a palpable manner, which is what has occurred. I don't care if that makes me a bad person or a lousy daughter. I couldn't be happier or more arrogant about the whole thing. After years and years of pain and emotional abuse, I am overjoyed to have finally seen justice. My father has made me feel awful as I've grown up. He suddenly remembers this daughter of his that he never really liked in the first place, now that he has no one else to rely on. Out of my 3 siblings, I, F31, am the middle one. Sarah, F29, is my younger sister, and Finley, Finn, M37, is my older brother. We were a happy family for the majority of my upbringing. At least my mom, F59, did her best to be an equal parent, even though my parents had their preferences. My father, M65, is not in the same boat. Favoritism was clearly visible in his actions. His favorite person was Sarah, and since Finn was the son, he naturally felt a connection with him and they could bond over man things. I was, of course, left out of this dynamic. It began at a very young age. I've always had the impression that my father didn't think highly of me. I made a few attempts to express it, maybe by throwing fits because I was a challenging kid overall, but nothing I ever did got his attention. As I grew older, I came to terms with it. I believe Mom tried to make up for his partiality after noticing it. Because I would have remained invisible my entire life if it had been up to my father, I have always adored her for seeing me. Mom did her best to be an equitable parent, but as I mentioned, she was not flawless. She treated us the same and loved us equally. I believe Finn noticed that she made an effort to keep me from feeling excluded. He attempted to fill in after noticing my neglect and my tendency to be distant. When Finn was learning how to change automobile tires, he would ask Dad if I could come along. When Dad taught him how to drive, he made sure I was present. Dad didn't involve me in the chats, so I know it was him. I didn't experience abuse or anything similar. We received similar gifts if they gave them to us. For example, I received as many new outfits as either Sarah or Finn. However, Dad never provided me with any emotional support. Mom and Finn attempted to fill that void in my life for all that time. Sarah, on the other hand, simply enjoyed playing the role of the young princess. She was a snobby child, and her attitude caused her school to raise various concerns. In some way, all of those worries were ignored. She developed into a very demanding and conceited young lady. I am not really close to her as a result. I'm really close to Finn, and he simply can't bear Sarah. Dad is the only one who does not find her behavior problematic. Mom barely puts up with her either. This is the current situation. Mom and Dad split about a decade ago. We have all been kept in the dark about the true reason for the friendly breakup. We all know that Mom and Dad's claim that they are no longer compatible is untrue. Something else is the true cause. Since none of them began dating someone new for a long period after the divorce, I am very sure it wasn't infidelity. We all still don't know the truth, and Mom and Dad have always wanted to keep it that way. There was no custody issue to deal with because we were all adults at the time. Since then, they've generally gotten along well. Since, let's face it, there's no love lost there, I have personally opted to avoid seeing Dad as much as possible. I suppose it works for both of us because he hasn't voiced any complaints about my absence. When I have free time, I usually visit Mom's house, although Finn and Sarah split their time equally between the two locations. We never go with Sarah unless it's for Christmas, but Finn and I occasionally plan our trips to Mom's house. Finn simply cannot tolerate her. When viewed from the outside, we appear to be rather normal and functional. But for once, I am glad that things have taken a turn for the worse. Mom began dating Arthur, M60, 5 years ago. They clicked right away after meeting at a yoga retreat. My time with Arthur is enjoyable, and he is a cool guy. He never tries to push limits and is kind to Finn and myself. Since nobody has ever mentioned it and I don't see any justification for him to treat Sarah badly, I'm going to presume that everything is well between them. All that matters is that Mom is happy. Even though Dad is very combative with Arthur, they have a friendly relationship. I believe it's because Dad doesn't have a steady partner and his dating life hasn't been very successful. In addition, Mom's life is opulent in comparison to her life with Dad, and Arthur makes a lot more money than Dad does. We are all pleased for Mom, but I believe Dad is really resentful of the whole thing. The fact that we get along well with Arthur is another thing he dislikes. Dad still acts envious despite Finn's attempts to explain that none of us are taking his place and that we are simply acting like responsible adults in this scenario. All of it is very offensive and childish. Fortunately, since I don't see Dad very often, I don't have to deal with a lot of it. The dynamics of the family are as follows at the moment. Understanding the backdrop is crucial to comprehending the events of the past few days. My fiancé, Kieran, M34, proposed to me a few months ago. We've spent a lot of time together. I prefer to stay private, therefore I didn't make the engagement public right away. After choosing the date, Kieran and I informed our families since we wanted to get married as soon as possible and avoid a lengthy engagement period. 1 week from now, the wedding is planned. My family's response when I told them was conflicted. Arthur was pleased, and Finn and Mom were ecstatic. Sarah appeared pretty unhappy, but Dad's response was fairly neutral. All of this took place during a video call, and I could see that she quickly ended the call after forcing a grin. She detests not being the center of attention, so I was expecting some sort of tantrum, but at that moment, I couldn't stand her theatrics. I informed Finn that I wanted him to be the one to escort me down the aisle, not Dad, and I called him separately to gossip. He remained silent for a time and claimed that although he was deeply moved by my request, he believed it was improper to fulfill and that Dad would make a big deal out of it. He claimed that although he would really like to, he was unable to do so since he didn't want to annoy his father. He said something that hurt me. He understood that I needed him to be there with me since he had been my male protector far more than Dad, and I informed him that I had come to him because I had been let down by Dad on multiple occasions. I hate to say it, but I also felt Finn was making sense, so I didn't argue with him about it. It was an emotional conversation. Gently, he assured me that it didn't matter if he escorted me down the aisle. It was crucial that my day be as uneventful as possible so that I could look back on it with joy and no resentment. If he were to assume Dad's position, he claimed, Dad would remain agitated during the ceremony and spoil the day and the memories for me. He was correct. I knew what Finn said would make my day simpler, if not perfect, and Dad was more than capable of pulling off such a ruse. Finn advised me to discuss it with Dad. I stated I would give it some thought and that I was hesitant to have him escort me down the aisle. Fortunately, Sarah and her boyfriend Zach announced their engagement 2 weeks later. After exchanging glances with Kieran, I knew she would try to steal the show at my wedding or do something else, but I couldn't help myself. Finn was also not very pleased. We were both aware of the timing, but we were unable to change it, so we kept quiet. One positive outcome of this is that Sarah's wedding is scheduled for approximately 5 weeks from now, 1 month after mine. The stars didn't align in her favor, so she had to be content to be the second bride in the family, even though she had really wanted to marry before me. I resisted her attempts to guilt me into delaying my wedding, even though she was rather sour about it. She needed to grow up since I wasn't the type to give in to her whims. Thus, things remained unchanged. But it seems that Dad and Sarah agreed that he would accompany her down the aisle before he did the same for me. I'm not really sure how they came up with something that strange. Since I never had much luck with boys in school or college, I suppose they figured I wouldn't get married or would get married later. In any case, once Sarah announced her engagement, I requested Dad to accompany me down the aisle. He sadly informed me that he had promised his baby that he would accompany her first. Years ago, while she was on her deathbed, which never materialized, he said he had made that commitment. Now, he wouldn't be able to lead me down the aisle because he couldn't break his word and break her heart. To be honest, I was thrilled because I didn't want him to accompany me down the aisle in the first place. I was dancing within as I feigned sadness and hurt. I assured him that even if it hurt, it didn't, I would accept his vow to Sarah because I respected it. I called Finn right away and informed him of the situation. He was upset with his father. Finn stated that he would have seized the chance to accompany me down the aisle immediately if he had known Dad would act in this manner. He said that I could choose whatever daughter I wanted to grant this privilege to if Dad could. I was too delighted to care if Finn was upset with Dad. In the end, it had turned out to be just what I had desired, and I am overjoyed. Despite the pressure of wedding planning, everything was going smoothly. Up until yesterday, when unheard of drama entered my life, drama for which I lacked the stamina, everything looked to be in order, despite my jitteriness and nervousness. Sarah told her father last night that he would not be accompanying her to the wedding. She requested Arthur to do it instead. We were all surprised by this. Not only that, she announced it via video call. She could have been more tactful about it, and it was cruel. We were all aware of Dad's excitement for her wedding. Because she and her fiancé wanted to save money for the honeymoon, he had even covered the entire cost. Dad had nearly mentally checked out of my life, and Mom and Dad were busy organizing 2 weddings. Since all of his attention was on Sarah, he had nothing to contribute or recommend and continued to show no interest in anything pertaining to my wedding. Furthermore, he had not made any financial contributions to my wedding. We were paying for it ourselves, Kieran and I. It had gotten to the point where I was depending more on Mom and Arthur's advice than on Dad's. In contrast to Sarah, Arthur was actively involved in my wedding preparations. Because of this, even Arthur appeared surprised by Sarah's request, or rather, her demand, and was unsure of how to react. When Mom finally stated that Arthur would love to do it, he continued to stare at her. I work in corporate, where terrible calls are almost a given, but that had to be one of the worst calls I've ever been on. Dad was crying. He began cursing out Arthur instead of discussing it with Sarah, and then hung up. And that was all. I didn't ask Dad how he was feeling, but I'm sure the others did. I quickly hung up the phone since I had too many other things to think about. Besides, this wasn't my problem. He didn't want to renege on the commitment he had made to Sarah. It was between them if she broke it. I didn't want or intend to step in. They were able to resolve it among themselves. I wasn't interested in becoming involved in trivial family matters at this time. I had no idea that it would soon cause me great annoyance. A few hours after his little princess dealt him a heartbreaking blow, Dad called me last night in tears. On the phone, he was crying and telling me that he would love to walk me down the aisle now and that he was foolish for turning down my offer. I was shocked by what I heard. It was astonishing how entitled they were. Although I was sorry for what had transpired, I gently explained to him that it was between him and Sarah. It had no bearing whatsoever on my wedding plans. I informed him that this had been decided months prior and that Finn was escorting me down the aisle. I also informed him that I was unable to make a last-minute modification. He promised to speak with Finn, saying that I didn't need to be concerned about Finn's disagreement because Finn was merely a placeholder for him. I explained to him that I didn't want to hurt Finn, not that he agreed. Dad didn't need to know that I didn't want him to be my father in the first place. I informed Dad that no swap was taking place, despite his insistence that he speak with Finn and make amends. The final step was for Finn to lead me down the aisle. He believed I was resisting because Finn wouldn't resign, and he was living in total denial. He was sure he could persuade Finn not to do it. After hanging up, I called Finn right away to let him know what was happening. It would be an understatement to say that Finn was furious. I informed him that I had always wanted him to be the one to reveal my identity when he asked what I wanted. Only at his encouragement did I ask Dad in the first place, and he was the first person I had asked. I replied in the affirmative when Finn asked if I was certain I wanted him to lead me down the aisle. Then he assured me that if Dad phoned him, he would correct him and that I shouldn't worry about anything. Since his favorite had sent him out, I told Finn that I didn't want any drama at the wedding and that Dad needed to realize that he couldn't just walk in anytime he wanted and use me as a stand-in daughter. Finn reassured me that there would be no alteration to the wedding arrangements and that he would make sure Dad knew about it. I haven't spoken to one of them since last evening. I'm getting so anxious about it. I truly don't have the energy to handle this turmoil at this time, and everything was going smoothly. I'm not sure if I should get in touch with them or hold off until I find out what transpired between Finn and Dad. I'm not even sure whether Finn has had a conversation with him yet. The anxiousness is making me queasy, and I'm at a loss for what to do. Update 1. Finn and I eventually spoke, and the situation is a complete mess, even worse than I had anticipated. Fortunately, he has taken care of the majority of it, so I won't have any issues. Finn claimed that he had been expecting a call from Dad to talk about the alleged change in plans, but the call never arrived. Finn recognized then that Dad was not going to talk about anything. Dad reasoned that since he had made the decision to accompany me down the aisle, everyone else must have agreed. After waiting a day for Dad to get in touch, Finn called him. Because I had mentioned something, he asked Dad if the arrangements had changed. In an attempt to appear casual, Dad said that because Sarah would no longer be walking me down the aisle, I had requested him to do so. Now, Finn, the more reasonable and level-headed of the three of us, is typically diplomatic. I was shocked to hear that he went completely crazy on Dad. Finn claimed that since they both knew I hadn't requested Dad to accompany me down the aisle, he urged him to stop being so rude. Rather, Dad had pleaded for the part after his beloved daughter had turned him down. Dad was enraged to hear this. When faced with the truth or anything he doesn't want to hear, he has a tendency to react violently. Finn, however, told Dad to stop talking and listen for once before he could interfere. Finn stated that considering how he had treated me over the years, Dad should be thankful that he was even receiving an invitation to my wedding. Then Finn relaxed. He later expressed regret to me for snapping at Dad, particularly so near the wedding, but he said he was unable to control himself. Finn longed for Dad to see his true self and shed the mask he was wearing. Finn admitted to Dad that he had always given preference to Sarah and had, at most, tried to get along with Finn, but I was never given any thought. In addition, he brought up the fact that I had requested Finn to accompany me down the aisle. I had only asked Dad at first because of Finn's persistence. Finn stated that he had thought Dad would use the occasion to begin repairing our relationship, but Dad squandered his opportunity. Finn said that none of his kids liked or respected Dad, calling him a failure of a father. Because Finn wasn't a fair parent, he didn't respect him. He never made an effort to love me or treat me like his daughter, therefore I didn't respect him. Sarah also didn't respect him since she wouldn't have pulled the prank she did if she did. Finn went on to claim that Dad was the source of Sarah's conceited demeanor. After years of lavishing her with attention, he was now having to deal with the fallout. Finn claimed that since Dad had been throwing out his other children since they were born, it was only fitting that his favorite child would throw out his favorite. Finn told me that although he didn't remember everything because he had shouted in a blinding passion, he did admit that he had spoken more. He reassured me that I didn't have to be concerned about Dad pulling any tricks after he got a harsh reality check. And Finn would take care of it right away if he did. Finn also clarified that the plans remained unchanged. He wouldn't alter the fact that he would be the one to lead me down the aisle. I was more than grateful that he apologized for the drama so close to the wedding. I've never been able to defend myself with such strength in my life. I always believed that I might have done something wrong for Dad to not love me. Over the years, I made an effort to get over that emotion, but I was never successful. Here I had my brother standing up for me, which I never thought anyone would do. When we were children, my mother ought to have defended me, but she didn't. She never challenged Dad, but she made an effort to compensate for the lack of affection in her own manner. Her diffidence and deference to him gave me the impression that I would never be able to confront him about how awful he was to me, though I don't blame her for it. But only because my brother loved me so much that he could no longer stand the idea of my going through this did that change. I was choking when I told him that this was the most beautiful thing anyone had ever done for me, and I was crying by the time he finished recounting the entire episode. It must be the greatest thing I could ever hope for, but I doubt Finn understands the extent of what he has done. Second update, I'm married now. In fact, Kieran and I are presently enjoying our honeymoon in Thailand after getting married a few days ago. Despite some turmoil beforehand, the wedding went off without a hitch. Dad couldn't walk even one daughter down the aisle, and Finn wasn't going to back down. The situation has become really bad. Dad was primarily worried about how his extended family would perceive him if he did not attend the weddings of both children. During his conversation with Finn, he kept returning to this subject. Once more, Finn bluntly informed him that he was emotionally checked out with me anyway, thus he was missing the role of father at least for my wedding. Finn advised him to express gratitude for the invitation in the first place. Since Sarah was his favorite, Dad could only wonder what went wrong with her, and no one truly knows why she did what she did. When word came out, Sarah had the gall to phone me and claim that it was unjust to Dad and that I wanted him to walk me down the aisle because she couldn't. Since she was using Dad's money to pay for her wedding and had expelled him, I encouraged her to have a life. I informed her that I had visited Dad and that, due to some foolish pledge she was unable to keep, he had decided to accompany her down the aisle. She was more than welcome to change things up at her wedding if she was so offended by her beloved father's misery. Since she was feeling awful about Dad, I assured her that Arthur would understand and that I could even speak with him on her behalf. She ended the call since she had nothing more to say. Before the wedding, I called Finn and informed him that I didn't want to be involved in any more father drama. If it came to me, it was his duty to make sure I was finished with this bullshit. I couldn't allow Dad to ruin my day because I had 100 other things to be happy about or worried about. I couldn't allow him to ruin my most memorable day because he had already made me miserable for most of my life. Finn assured me that he would handle everything and that I shouldn't worry. It would be an understatement to say that I was really anxious on my wedding day, but fortunately, everything went smoothly. I'm glad Dad didn't try to start anything, even though he appeared to be rather glum. After a point, I was too preoccupied with having fun to give his pouty face much thought. It was awkward between them, and Sarah tried to avoid Dad as much as possible, but I didn't mind. I'm happy that nobody was able to ruin the wedding because it went off without a hitch. I could feel Dad glaring daggers at my back as Finn led me down the aisle, but that was all he could do. According to what I've been informed, Dad has been left to handle some damage control after a few people questioned why Finn was up there instead of him. That's his cross to carry, then. In order to live a peaceful existence and eliminate any possibility of turmoil, I also want Sarah's wedding to be over. I'm going to cut off communication with Dad for the foreseeable future after her wedding. In any case, I don't see the need to keep in contact with him. Update 2. Yesterday was Sarah's wedding. She didn't ask Kieran and me to the wedding, so I wouldn't know how it went. I'm not sure what she was trying to accomplish, but I was more than willing to watch. It was just Mom, Arthur, and Dad there, and to her dismay, Finn did not go either. At the last minute, Dad reportedly hoped she would change her mind and ask him to lead her down the aisle, but that never occurred. It was quite unpleasant, and it's clear from the pictures she shared that Arthur would much rather be somewhere else. Mom is just finished, Dad is glum, and Arthur is uneasy. I don't really care, but aside from that, her wedding went smoothly. I was called up by Mom to provide these details. Naturally, Dad is unhappy because he had hoped that at least one of us would give in and allow him to do as he pleases. Now, however, his personal life is in disarray and all of his children are essentially cut off from him. I don't care that he isn't handling it well. For being such a bad father to me, allowing me to have a miserable childhood, and even helping to cause it, I genuinely believe it serves him right. I've had enough of him, and I don't want Sarah's or his poison to affect this new stage of my life or my new family. I'm relieved they're no longer in my life. My mom wants me to marry my creepy stepbrother and have his child. She now harasses me at work and lies about the inheritance. I, 29F, have an older stepbrother, Chris, 42M, who has been a nightmare since the day my mom married his dad. Let me give a bit of background. Our parents married when I was 4 and he was 17. Both our parents were widowed. After their wedding, we moved to the US since my mom had American citizenship through marriage. I was born in the US too, but after my dad died when I was 1, my mom and I moved back to Colombia. My stepdad got his residency through marriage, and my stepbrother, because he was a minor, wasn't a big fan of me. My only memories of him are just constant bullying. He would be left in charge of me since he was studying locally and lived with my parents. But mostly, his babysitting really meant things like locking me in the guest bathroom or the shed outside. He would steal my lunchbox whenever he was the one who dropped me off at school. He even began to harm my pets. I have an old cat that has been with me for almost 22 years. He tried more than once to run her over with his car. My parents never believed any of it. He's the classic golden child. My mom absolutely wanted a son instead of a daughter, so my stepbrother took priority over me. The bullying just kept getting worse and creepier. He had this long key for the bathroom. The door was designed so that if it got locked by accident, one could open it by inserting a long stick or key through a small hole on the outside. He would use it to walk in on me showering. My underwear would disappear sometimes, and I know for a fact it was him. He also started taking pictures of me sleeping. One night, I woke up to him taking care of himself next to me while I slept. I yelled, obviously. My parents came over, but he wasn't in trouble. I was, for tempting him. I was 14 when this happened. He was 27. No one helped me, and he got bolder until he did something I am still in therapy for. When I was 16, it got to a point where I called my biological half-brother, Sam, 48M, and son of my biological father's first wife, to see if I could live with him and his wife, Sandy, during my last 2 years of high school. When Sam found out what was going on, he confronted my mom. My mom didn't care and just told him to take me, as long as he never asked her for money. Done and done. My brother and his wife became my legal guardians and took me in with my cat and the old family dog since I didn't trust leaving any living creature with Chris around. My parents never checked on me. My extended family from my father's side knew what happened and immediately got together to ensure I could finish school well and go to college. I don't know my maternal family at all. Thanks to my paternal family, including Sam's mother and her family, I got my bachelor's and master's with no student debt and work as a nurse practitioner. I still live with Sam, his wife and their 2 kids, and I pay a small rent. Neither Sam nor his wife expected me to pay anything, but that's the least I can do for the 2 people who have taken care of me for 13 years. For anyone wondering why I didn't move, it's incredibly expensive where I live and Sam insisted I stay with them until I save enough to buy my own home. Things seemed okay until my mom messaged me recently. She had not messaged me since I was 18, when she told me she no longer had any responsibility for me. In this message, she sounded overly friendly, telling me how she missed me and asking how I was doing. I was a bit creeped out but decided to be nice, telling her about what I had done since leaving her care. She seemed very interested, as apparently, she knew I was a nurse but not what kind I was. She began asking me about my salary. I didn't tell her anything about it, except that it was enough to pay the bills. My mom then began texting about Chris and how he was barely making any money due to his student debt. Apparently, Chris never finished a degree, jumping from career to career. He is now working in my stepdad's used car business as a salesman, but most of his pay goes toward his substantial student debt accumulated over the years. I told my mom how sorry I was that Chris was having a hard time and wished him luck. That's when my mom finally got to what she wanted. She texted me that I needed to pay his student debt so he could finally begin to make the money he deserves, like the man of the family. I just turned off my phone. When I got home, Sam was surprised since I was usually the last to arrive. Sandy wasn't home yet. I told Sam what happened and showed him my mom's text messages. I don't think I've seen Sam this angry ever. He told me to block my mom, stepdad and Chris if I hadn't done so yet. After talking with Sam and Sandy, I called my boss to ask for the next day and the one after off. This gave me a 4-day weekend, including the days I'm normally off shift. My boss was more than okay with this and told me to just take it easy and let her know if she could help. This backfired because the next day, my mom and Chris decided to come to Sam's house to speak to me. I was alone since Sam and Sandy were at work and the kids were at school. I immediately called Sam and told him what was going on. He told me not to open the door and that he was on his way. My mom spent the whole time screaming that I owed them for raising me and that my sweet brother deserved the money. Chris was going around trying to find a window or door unlocked. There weren't any, since the windows have safety bars and the only other doors are in the closed garage and one in the yard. The yard door was locked, and just in case, I locked the one in the garage. I won't post what he called me when he saw me from one of the windows, but basically, he told me they should have thrown me away when I was a baby since I grew to be a burden. He pounded on one of the windows so hard that he cracked the glass. Eventually, he gave up and went back to the front door, clearly trying to kick it down. I didn't have anything to worry about. The door was a security door, but I was still very scared. Between yelling, threatening, pleading and insults, I finally heard Sam screaming at them to get lost. I only saw things from the window. Sam pretty much dragged them both off the porch. They got to a point I couldn't hear, but I saw my mom and Chris looking pale and scared before they ran to their car and drove off way past the legal speed limit. Sam came in a bit later and immediately went into full protective brother mode, asking me if I was okay. He kept saying sorry and hugging me. Sandy arrived almost immediately after and looked like she was about to commit a felony. Apparently, Sam threatened them with filing charges for what Chris did to me when I was 16. My brother's ace, my stepdad, was willing to testify against his own son. That seemed enough to get Chris off our backs, but not my mom. Since then, it's been 3 days, and my mom has sent texts, called non-stop from various numbers, and rallied a group of people who are supposedly my maternal family to harass me for money. She claims that the money should legally be hers since she's my mother, and that it's my late father's missed child support. Sam is helping me find a lawyer to get a restraining order on my mom, and I plan to take my stepdad's offer to testify by pressing charges against Chris. I can't say I can forgive him for not stopping his son, but I appreciate that he's at least trying. I don't know the details, but Chris did something to a relative of his dad, and since then, they had a really bad fallout. I took my boss's offer and will be on vacation for a few more days. But here it is. My vacation days are getting eaten up and my therapist might need a therapist after this. Thankfully, my dark sense of humor and supportive paternal family are keeping me somewhat sane. Update. I didn't think I would be making an update so soon, but my mother is unrelenting. To the people who were so kind and gave me advice earlier, thank you so much. It really helps to have people show kindness in difficult days. I followed the advice to freeze my credit and will be getting a new phone for personal use. I'll have to keep my old phone for work for a little while. Now, to update on the situation, we are going through with pressing charges and might pursue a civil lawsuit for 2 years of child support my mother owes. We are not sure yet of our chances, but my brother wants to go scorched earth. As for my mother, she began a new campaign. She's been posting false accusations about me, accusing my stepbrother Chris of sexual assault. She's also been accusing me of being a temptress who tried for years to sleep with my brother. She even got a few relatives, who I just found out are my aunts, to join in, claiming they were witnesses. I have never met these women in my life. My stepfather actually commented on her post, saying my mom was lying and accusing his own son of being a pedophile. That's how I found out about the big fallout between them. My stepbrother apparently went after one of my stepfather's nieces. I don't know the girl's age, but she has to be about my age if I'm thinking of the right person. If not, she's younger than me. A lot of my biological father's relatives have also taken to social media to call out my mother, saying she had always claimed she was an orphan and had no family, while now she suddenly has 3 sisters. It's a mess. I'm just watching for now and being a stay-at-home aunt. My nephews love it since we go out for crazy shenanigans after they finish their homework. My boss has helped me with some paperwork for a leave of absence, and I should be off for about 6 weeks. After that, I'll be mostly working from home for a few weeks. It's not the greatest update, and to be sincere, things are not fun, but it's nice to spend time with the kiddos at least. Also, I forgot to mention this. No, my mom is not likely sleeping with or in a relationship with my stepbrother, as some people had mentioned. My mom always wanted a son, and I was a disappointment because I was born a girl. She treats my brother like he's her real son, and I think she truly loves him as a mother. She made sure to tell me how disappointing it was for her when I was born. Update 2. I hope the title is okay for the rules. I was recommended to post here but wasn't sure where to start. My mother was widowed when I was 1 year old. My biological father was much older than her. She was his second wife, with a 20-plus year age difference. After that, she remarried her hometown sweetheart and adopted his 17-year-old son. My dad was American, and my mom is Colombian. I was born in the US, then we moved back to Colombia for a few years, and we returned to the US when I was 4. My whole life, my mother constantly complained about the fact that I was a girl. She would say things like, "If you were a boy, maybe we could have gotten more from your father." Or "Girls are so useless." All I was to her was the problem child. She took my inheritance and squandered it, mostly on things for my stepbrother. Whenever she had guests, she would always introduce me and joke about how I ruined her body and wasn't even worth it since I was a girl. Most of her friends thought I had some kind of mental illness because of her lies about me being mentally behind. She used the R word, and would often blame it on my gender, saying that because I was born a girl, I was clearly inferior. During holidays, I would be left behind with a sitter. I was just too much of a problem child and would ruin things for my sweet brother. We only have one family picture from when I was 5. If I got anything nice with my own money, my mother would take it from me. If it was something like makeup or clothes, she would say I wasn't attractive enough or worthy enough to have such nice things. I should just stick with a plain face since it would make it easier for me to find a job when I was done with high school. She had no intentions of letting me go to college. But the worst part is, she never protected me. My stepbrother is a predator. At first, he just bullied me, stealing my food and locking me in dark places. When I hit puberty though, he began to do worse things. Walking in on me when I showered, even if I locked the door. Stealing my underwear, watching me sleep. And he even sexually assaulted me when I was 16 and he was 29. My mother blamed it on me, saying I was tempting her poor sweet boy. I was saved by my biological half-brother and his wife. They took me in at 16, finished raising me, and put me through college with the help of my paternal family. Even my father's first wife pitched in and has always been kind to me. She's more of a mother to me than my own mother ever was. Now, I'm 29 years old, have a good career as a nurse practitioner, and I'm saving to buy my own home. My mother found out about this and has been demanding that I give her my money because she is my mother, and my money should be hers. She also demands that I pay off my abusive stepbrother's student loans. Since I refuse to comply with my dear mother's demands, she has now gone online to post that I'm a temptress trying to ruin her son's life and that I refuse to pay her back for all the care and love she supposedly gave me over the years. She even had some women, who are supposedly my aunts, join her in this. I've never met any of my maternal family. As far as I knew, my mother was an orphan. Now, I suddenly have 3 aunts who claim to have seen how bad a person I am. Update 3. This might be my last update about my mother and stepbrother since we're finally starting the legal fights, but I finally had a good laugh. In my previous posts, I haven't said much about my biological father. He died when I was 1 year old, so I never really met him. I have one picture of him holding me when I was an infant. I mostly know him from stories from his family. What I do know is that he was a man of means. He had a lot of assets that he carefully divided in his will, not so rich I'll never have to work rich, but just rich enough that I would be able to live comfortably as long as I worked and managed my finances well. I was not aware that he had made sure to leave me anything, and neither was my half-brother Sam, his son with his first wife. I'm the daughter of an affair partner turned second wife. My understanding was that anything I inherited was wasted by my mother to buy things for her predator stepson Chris, whom she prefers over me. He was my abuser growing up. In her words, daughters don't need inheritance, just marry a wealthy old man like me. Well, since my mother and Chris have been harassing me lately, we drove to my dad's lawyer to get some things we need from my dad's records for the lawsuit we are planning. He's a sweet older man who kind of looks like my dad a bit and was my dad's best friend. When we met, he received me with a hug and told me how happy he was to finally meet me. His wife was there too, and she also gave me a big hug and told me we needed to have dinner at their place. Once we all caught up, we discovered my mother had been faking receipts to get money from my trust. A lot of it, some of which was from when I was under Sam's guardianship. She's not the executor of my trust and had to provide receipts for anything. She's been sending receipts claiming they're for me because I'm still in medical school, even though I finished school in 2021. Well, her meal ticket not only got torn, but now she's in big trouble because this is fraud, and basically, my hands are tied about pressing charges. She claims me as a dependent on her taxes so my dad's lawyer would refund her for her expenses. He basically told me there's just no way we can keep this in civil court. He had to contact the IRS and the police. It doesn't help that she's been using my social security number for some things she shouldn't. Thank you to the people who advised me to freeze my credit. You guys saved me for sure. I probably won't be able to post for quite a while since I'm going to be incredibly busy. I'm just mentally exhausted from how much has happened. I wouldn't have done anything about my mom using my trust if she had left me alone. I wouldn't even know about it because the trust is set for me to take over with proof of marriage or graduation from college. Since I didn't know about it, I never sent the required paperwork to take control. She could have milked it dry if she left me alone and just kept sending fake information. I'm in the process of getting what's left of my trust. There's quite a bit in it and it should be enough for me to get a house or condo if I mix it with my savings and still have some left over to invest or do other things safely. I might wait for a while to buy anything though. I don't know how safe it would be since my mom still has my social security number. Update 4. Hey Reddit, this is more of a personal rant than a full-on update. Things are only starting on the legal side of things, so no real update or information I'm allowed to share. This is more on the personal side of things since I just came home from having my mother harass me in a bar. It was not fun. Short background. My mother is a greedy liar who let her stepson Chris, who's 13 years older than me, abuse me since I was a small child. First, it was physical abuse, then sexual abuse started when I was 14 until I was 16. Now she wants me to clear a student debt, and she has been mooching off my biological father's inheritance. As for last night, well, I decided to go out with some girlfriends for a girls' night. My half-brother Sam and his wife Sandy have been pushing me to go out for a while. We went to a local bar. I mostly stuck to the stools by the bar as I'm a massive introvert, but I like seeing my friends having fun. So I was simply drinking and talking to the bartender in passing. Well, my good mood was ruined when I noticed my mother, thankfully alone, walk towards me. The moment she saw me, she pretty much launched herself to hug me and began crying, saying how much she had missed me and how different I looked. I was trying really hard to get away from her, but she began causing a scene. She started begging for us to reconcile, saying that she was sorry I took my stepbrother's affection the wrong way, that they both love me and want me to live with them. She was loud, and people were looking at me. Some even looked sorry for her, and I had people encouraging me to hug my mom back. It was embarrassing and just so wrong. I just exploded and told her to leave me alone and walked out. That was even worse because she kept following me, with 2 or 3 randoms calling me a terrible daughter. She just kept swearing that Chris truly cares for me and wants us to be a family again. She even said that he found me so beautiful that he couldn't help himself when he sexually assaulted me. She said, when he made love to you. As if it was something consensual. I was a minor when he attacked me. He was almost 30. I just started crying and screaming at her to go away and leave me alone. Thankfully, one of my more sober friends called Sam, and he came over very fast. He scared away my mom and took me home. I'm now 100% sure I don't want to go out again. For people wondering why I never called the cops, I called the cops since I was 11 to report the abuse. I reported at 16 what he did to me. They took his side. I don't trust them. I truly believe cops don't care about sexual assault victims. I'm just writing this to get it out of my system. My therapist is unavailable, so Reddit is the next best thing. Update 5. Hey, been a bit, sorry for the radio silence. I had some people asking for updates, but things had been pretty quiet until this weekend, so I had nothing to post. I know people usually do a recap app or something like that, so TLDR. My mother has always preferred my stepbrother Chris, who is 42. He was my abuser growing up. The abuse went from the time I was 11 to 16, when I moved in with my half-brother after the worst attack. I was recently tracked down by my mother, and she along with my stepbrother have been harassing me since. Currently, I'm in a legal fight against them to recover some stolen inheritance from my father and to resolve other matters. This weekend, once again, my mother decided to accost me at work. I was working from home, doing clerical work for the clinic I work at. I'm a nurse practitioner but took some clerical duties to be able to work from home when the mess with my mother and Chris began. Since then, the time I could work from home has ended, so I'm back in the clinic taking patients. For the most part, Saturday went well and quiet. Sunday, however, I noticed someone that shared my mother's name but not her last name. My mom has a very unique name, very old-sounding, and I've seen it only twice in my whole life. Of course, there's a big Latino community where I live, so I just assumed this was another person. We're from a Colombian family, though I was born in the US to an American father. Lo and behold, it was my mother using a fake last name. When I saw her, I immediately called my boss. She's aware of the situation and immediately went to ask my mother to please leave the premises. This can be a controversial move, so to explain it before the debate starts. She was in for a general checkup, not a life or death treatment. She was not denied because of protected reasons, but because I, as a member of staff, felt my life was in danger in her presence. There are a lot of other clinics with varying prices, and they are open to new patients, so she can get her checkup anywhere else. This is allowed under our state's law. If she was hyperventilating or clearly in distress, we would not have been able to ask her to leave. My mother, of course, went on a rampage demanding to be seen by me specifically. My boss, thankfully, was not intimidated and just insisted my mother had to leave or else the cops would be called. After a back and forth that I was watching from the security cameras, this all happened in our waiting room. My mother threw a letter at my boss and left fuming. She even pushed a lady that was walking in, though thankfully no one was hurt. My boss brought me the letter and told me she will make sure not to assign me any patients with my mother's first name and went to make arrangements with our front desk. I took a break and decided to read the letter, mostly to see if it was something I could use for my legal case. This is a translation to my best capabilities. My lovely daughter, it hurts me so much that you refuse to speak to me. I love you so much, and all I want is to recover the years we've lost. I only have you left from your father, whom I love dearly. I know there are a lot of misunderstandings with Chris. He loves you so much too, and I wish you would give him a chance to prove it to you. He always talked about how beautiful you are and how much he wished you two could spend more time together. He truly adores you, and I wish you would consider his feelings more. He even asked me to convince you to marry him, and I think it's a wonderful idea. Papa, your stepfather, and I are probably divorcing, and this will be the perfect solution so Chris, you and I can stay a family. He keeps going on and on about how much he wants to raise your and his baby together. Let me know when you want to go shopping for wedding dresses. I love you, my darling. Mom, I'm going to share a few personal notes here. I am unable to get pregnant. After Chris's attack, I had some medical complications that have left me unable to conceive. My mother knows about it. Chris knows about it. The cops know about it. They ruled the whole thing as consensual sex, and because I was 16, the legal age of consent, nothing was done. I showed this to my lawyer, and he added it to the compilation of things we're using for the legal case. Still no court date, and the cops don't consider my case risky enough to do the paperwork for a restraining order. I do have one officer who is taking this very seriously and has been amazing. It's just the majority who don't seem to care or have too much on their docket to give my case time. Update. I'm going to update here since it's only been 3 days and it feels dumb to make a new post. Chris has been arrested. Apparently, he kidnapped a 2-year-old baby girl, his cousin's daughter, no less. The baby was recovered safe and unharmed from what I heard. I'm glad she wasn't taken for long. Who knows what the hell he wanted to do to her. If I hear more details, I'll update. Arrogant boss fires expert, leading to £800K project disaster. Sweet revenge unfolds, but the story ends in tragedy. Who am I? Do you know? It backfires on an egotistical manager when a $800,000 project goes off course because he sacked an invaluable staff member. First of all, this never happened to me. I was with the individual when they got a call concerning this problem. Then he walked me through it all. He is not on Reddit, hence I am sharing it. It is valuable. Every name has been modified to guard corporate and personal identities. The plot depends much on listed structures. There is a mechanism in place in the UK for maintaining historic and significant constructions. A building deemed historically significant is referred to as a listed building. The guidelines for its evolution, preservation, and enhancement are rather rigorous. I have to be obscure about the labor involved. Else, it would be too simple to name the people engaged. David, a buddy of mine, is quite specialized in a very small field of building. Using a very ancient building technique not used for several millennia, he fixes and renovates buildings. His whole output focuses on listed buildings and conservation projects. Work needed on a Grade 1 listed property. ACC Limited, the major contractor, was handling the building generally. There is quite specific study on one aspect. The architect provided a list of suitable candidates as the contractor management knew no one who had done it. The contractors selected my friend since he was most available early on. 5 days into the project, the major contractor, ACC Limited, arrived on site. David's words? He was a boisterous gobshite throwing his weight about. David ignored him while he was merely working. One of his carpenters was directed by the boisterous gobshite to make him coffee. The carpenter vanished. The noisy gobshite kept prowling and grumbling about delays costing him a lot of money. The boisterous gobshite asked my pal a question 15 minutes after the carpenter vanished. "Where's that chippy with my coffee?" asked a noisy gobshite. Chippy = carpenter. Chippy = carpenter. David, I'm not clear. Go and find out, a noisy gobshite says. David, I'm only here for this job, gesturing at the walls. I work for ACC Limited, not for you. Noisy gobshite. It makes no difference if you're an employee or a subcontractor. You still are working for me. Now go and locate my coffee. David. First of all, I find it offensive to be spoken to like manners. Second, my contract with you is to do these walls, nothing else. I most definitely am not a gopher. Noisy gobshite. Oh, do you not value being spoken to in such a manner? For which subcontractor do you now work? David. None. I run my business alone, just me. Noisy gobshite. A day laborer. And you have the guts to address me in such a manner? Do you know my name? David. Sure. Well, you're fired. A noisy gobshite says. Get out of the premises right away. David says, okay. Just get off the site, says a noisy gobshite. David grabbed out his phone and started recording. David. Okay, I'll leave. Just want evidence you advised me to leave. Grabbing David's hand containing the phone, a noisy gobshite yelled into the phone, "Get off the site, you idiot," a noisy gobshite says. You're let off. I'll have you thrown out if you're still here in 10 minutes. David. Cool, not problematic. He took up his gear and left. The contractor's site manager passed him, ironically with a coffee for the boss, as he was leaving and smiled. Site manager. Dave, you're leaving early? Bloody part-time kidding. David, no, your boss just sacked me. We have signed out our contract. Apologies, friend. The site manager said, No, allow me to arrange things here. Please wait, kindly. David left the site. Knowing something the boisterous gobshite lacked, the site manager was losing his head. In the UK, just 7 persons are certified to handle the task. Every one of them had a waiting list. David had been the only one accessible. 12 missed calls by the time he arrived home. That was Thursday, 2 working days absent so far. He claimed he would go back only if he was paid for the extra days and personally apologized to the employer. I met my friend as he was answering a call from the site manager, stating the boss apologies but is out of the country, so cannot apologize personally. David also informed me he warned the other specialist over the phone, but they had all been contacted on Friday asking to be assigned work. Nobody picked up the work. They were all booked full. To warn him, David also called the architect. Under such circumstances, some dishonest builders attempt to falsify the work and bodge the job. David is going to keep his guns. Money for all missing days plus a face-to-face apologies. He is positive he will grasp it. I mentioned I would pay anything to see the in-person apologies. Update 1. The site manager called to inform David he was advised by the noisy gobshite to threaten legal action should David fail to complete his work. The site manager became really ashamed and apologetic. David reminded him he left and had documentation proving he was let go. The site manager called once more to inform the noisy gobshite will be personally apologizing on Friday. Could David begin tomorrow? David said no. Following the legal action threat, the criteria are different. Before work starts, a face-to-face apology. Additional compensation for lost days. Paying the whole contract value up front before work starts. All of this has to happen on Thursday. He can start today and still expect to finish before his next reservation. Should he work weekends as well, he has just enough time. I questioned him about why he isn't charging the man who is such a wanker a hefty extra fee. He remarked it's not the done thing to take advantage of businesses under time constraints, it looks bad. One of my pals apparently is a guy from the 18th century. Edit. When David mentioned just 7 others do this work, I misinterpreted him. He intended 7 different companies distinct from his own. Since they are small companies, he argues it is most likely just about 20 persons capable of doing it. Still a limited amount, although not as humorally tiny as 7. I apologize for misled all of you regarding the count. Update 2. Sadly, an apology appears unlikely. David has found that the site manager was sacked for not alerting the noisy gobshite of the circumstances earlier. David told the operations director for ACC Limited, the second noisy gobshite, that he would not be returning to the position, so an apology is not needed. Apologizing for everything, the operations director promised to very liberally renegotiate the money. David informed him he had only thought about returning to the position as a personal courtesy to the original site manager. He feels no need to go back as he is not there. The operations director indicated he will contact David but omitted any explanation. Why he didn't say, "Give him his job back," or "I won't come back," I wondered. David remarked the boisterous gobshite is too weak and petty to be guided by a craftsman. It will have to be the concept of the company for the site manager returning. They won't bring him back if I order them to. David thinks it's difficult to obtain a job at 61 since the site manager is excellent at his work but only 4 years from retirement. I have decided that David appeals to me even more than 3 days before. 3 updates. It is 2 in the morning here. We just came out of the bar. David answered a call from the dismissed site manager while we were out. David reported the circumstances to the architect this afternoon. The architect got in touch with the terminated site manager to let him know about a company needing a site manager. Just before 9 p.m., the dismissed site manager called David. I had to sit through the one-sided phone call. I had to have looked like I had a house full of sparrows, childishly thrilled. Then David filled in for me. The site manager rang to thank him and find out his preferred drinks so he might bring him a bottle. He is seeing them on Friday even though he does not yet have the new job. The architect is hopeful since apparently his advice has some weight. David first rejected. David, I didn't not get you a job. The architect done. Site manager. But you told the architect I had been sacked because of you, therefore you set all this in motion. I never have to deal with that annoying pillock ever once again. David left no clear identification for the irritable pillock. We will have to conjecture. David mentioned his drink is Cardhu Gold Reserve. He declared he would only take a bottle if A. the site manager lands the new position. B. should the site manager visit and sip the Cardhu with David. The whiskey consumption does not seem to include the attractive scribe who painstakingly and time-consumingly skillfully recorded this narrative down on Reddit. David elegantly said, "Piss off, knobhead, you can get your own drink." Except that nobody gets to see the tosspot noisy gobshite eat crow when he has to apologize. All excellent news ideally. I had great anticipation about that. David and the SAC site manager know each other outside of the office. Though two separate clubs, they are members of charitable organizations in the same location and cooperate extensively. David is Roundtable, whereas the site manager belongs to the Rotary Club. Though you never know, I doubt he is a knight. David was contacted by the operations director of ACC Limited to propose that they kindly renegotiate the money by bringing the site manager back. They have missed the boat, David says. He cannot finish the work on his own before beginning his next employment. Should all go without a hitch, there is an absolute minimum of 11 days labor left. David's next employment begins on November 4th. Assuming he works weekends, there are 10 days left. Last minute. I wish I could be a fly on the wall when the noisy gobshite is informed. Many people often ask, what does David do? If I said what it was, it would be quite identifying. I could as well tell you his actual name and address. Apologize. There are extremely few of them since it takes 5 years to become just competent and at least 9 years to be a master artisan. At least one master present is needed for the jobs done. Update 4, bad news. The site manager who was sacked did not land the other position. He met the new company, but they are not extending an invitation to him. The explanations are not obvious. David is seeing him Sunday to go over it. Though David is not at blame, I can sense he feels guilty about it. The site manager claims he will act regarding unjust firing. Though I imagine this would be a win-win-win, I suppose life isn't like that. News about the sacked site manager. The current state of affairs is not as dire as first assumed. We misinterpreted what transpired on Friday. David chatted with him yesterday. That aspect is accurate. The employer he visited on Friday is not hiring him in the usual manner. On a distribution center build, they have, however, presented him with a fixed-term contract spanning 18 months. Though not ideal, on the plus side it pays somewhat more than ACC. Though just 18 months, it is better than nothing. Should another project surface, the new business also has the option to extend the contract. David has heard that someone Bulgarian is visiting to cover for the work. David was grinning when he informed me. He believes he understands exactly what will happen. Some 19th century Sophian structures feature a comparable but different method that was used. David believes the man will apply such an approach. Though two extremely crucial elements are different, it looks comparable. David has opted to hold off. David is going to advise the client and the planning department to verify the two components. He intends to allow the Bulgarian to finish the job and get paid. The Bulgarian will have used the incorrect tools unless he is familiar with the English approach from the 17th century. It would mean pulling it apart and beginning over. They treat this kind of work quite rigorously. Though I hardly desire this, I truly hope this comes true. I'm a minor dude. More info. Many people are wondering when David would find out whether the Bulgarian performed the work as expected. Given that there are few vendors of one of the materials, David might know really quickly. Should the Bulgarian get in touch, David will be informed. David said, it's a tiny incestuous part of the industry, and they gossip like old women. Correction. Like older women, we all gossip. David is leaving it alone till told the work is done and the Bulgarian is paid if he does not visit there. He wants not to jeopardize the man's money. David said, I don't want the Bulgarian to drag his arse over here and go home empty-handed just because I can't wait to drop silly bollocks. The man has a living to support him. I'm going to wait. Silly bollocks is the same person as noisy gobshite just in case of uncertainty. Unless he works weekends, the Bulgarian should finish his job in 3 weeks. David will know when the work is done as he knows several people at ACC head office and several on site. I must thus wait on my hands for 3 to 4 weeks and appear to be a non-excited 7-year-old girl not complaining about Christmas approaching. Update 5. According to David, the Bulgarian got right to it and began working. Materials have been delivered, but from an ordinary building supplier. Though they sell it in Bulgaria, the items he requires for the work are too heavy for him to carry with him. He hasn't asked for it from the UK provider. 3, but only one has enough for this work since David brought it in for her. He is therefore not using the correct materials unless he is arriving by road and ferry. Though he was not bothered by raucous gobshite, David would not let it go unrecorded. He is a purist in terms of historical accuracy and truly enjoys maintaining all the structures he works on. I therefore have to hold my water for 3 to 4 weeks. David claims he might finish earlier if he uses more contemporary materials. If you stay in the 17th century, 3 weeks is the period. About this work, I have become such a weirdo. David knew I was after information after I phoned him earlier under cover of pretext. Do you want me to fit a body cam so you can watch and hear everything as it happens? David asked me. I answered, That would be great if it would not be too much trouble and you could link me into your phone calls. Laughing, David said, "You knob cheese, is it okay if I cover the lens when I'm shagging my wife?" Personal Ollie, I don't do those two things at the same time, but whatever floats your boat, I said. David, you are telling me you do them separately. Me? Right after she washed all the garbage off the sheets after doing you. A few of us are finicky. David said, piss off, you're an uptight clean freak. Hangs. Not farewell, not see you shortly. English behavior is not what it once was. Though I realize it doesn't look like it, really I do have a life. I never would have thought I would be typing Update 6 when I originally started working on this. Update 6 Many news stories. 2 weeks ago the Bulgarian completed his work and returned home. Those who met Stefan the Bulgarian said he was a decent man and a really diligent worker. He worked weekends and 12-hour days to help to offset the expenses of living in the UK. David is glad he waited until Stefan paid before he reported the work, knowing what he discovered about Stefan. David already felt rather certain Stefan was not performing as required. None of the 3 companies he checked, the sole UK suppliers of the most unusual substance involved in the job, said they had an order for the site. Stefan might have imported it, of course, but nobody on site had seen an international material order. As scheduled, David thus made calls to the client, the architect, the local authority planning department, and Historic England. He waited for them to investigate after outlining his worries in the simplest, least invasive manner possible. Though it just took a few days, I can really say that I have never been that nervous or committed in anything unrelated to my pissing business. The architect produced the first report on incorrect materials and technique applied. Not the English one demanded, he had applied a Bulgarian technique from the 19th century rather than the 17th. The architect was really agitated. David Avid stated this phone call was blue, but he had never heard the architect using foul words before. The architect apparently termed the boisterous gobshite, ignorant cockwomble. David defined a womble for me. I knew nothing. Approach is welcome. Not wanting people to believe this was anything to do with him, the architect said he was going to get in touch with the local authorities. Most of the remainder came to David's second or third hand. He knows some of the staff from ACC, I wanted to know whether it was challenging to get them to tell him anything. He mentioned they lacked the quick adequate phone pickup ability. The location was visited and the work examined by the local government planning officials. They informed the contractor that the work had to be cleared and corrected since it was totally improper. Then it became fascinating. Looking about the property, the inspectors discovered a problem. It would be too simple to pinpoint the buildings involved, hence I cannot be exact about this. The builder had wrecked some of the structure. Though it was not very significant, there was an internal feature included into the roof construction. Although they were not let to, they removed it and replaced it with a far superior modern support. The project manager, the new site manager, or staff member neither understood the significance. Who ordered it to be replaced with a cheap, quick alternative rather than the slow, expensive, rebuilt option? Of course, it was noisy gobshite. Destroying anything on this kind of property is illegal, jail sentence type of crime. It's a huge fine even if they avoid jail. Everyone in that company is thus pointing fingers at one another and claiming no accountability right now. According to Noisy Gobshite, he did not direct the internal roof structural components to be removed. The project manager has email proving he did. The client asked all of the contractor's employees off the site on Tuesday, the 19th. They are currently looking over everything. They're most definitely firing the contractor. They have written guidelines for bids from fresh contractors. They will also sue the contractor for the expenses of undoing and fixing all they have done improperly. The architect's projection came at £800,000. The local government planning department wrote to the contractor detailing their mistakes and alerting them of their intentions for inspection and the likelihood of prosecution. On the day the letter arrived, Noisy Gobshite vanished to the lawyers, claims the staff. Within an hour, David received 3 calls from 3 separate ACC phones as word of the letter spread around the workforce. Now we are awaiting a few things. 1. The client's checkup. Should that prove ACC has damaged the site, the client is entitled to terminate the contractor. ACC has a huge repair debt and does not get paid. 2. Local authority inspections conducted by conservationists. Should they have destroyed elements of the property, the local government will punish ACC as a company and the individual responsible. David is rather disappointed since it is impossible to rebuild the internal framework lost. That was sitting there performing its job for 400 years until that gist stain enters the picture, he said. It goes then, and that is it, never again. He comes across as really depressed. I'm guessing Noisy Gobshite is yearning he had his own coffee that day last month. Edit, The letter to ACC, not their actual name, did not threaten a prosecution. It simply made them aware of the intention of the planning department to send a professional to check the construction and, more especially, the changed area. Apparently, should prosecution take place, it takes eternity. My real apologies for misleading all of you. Like everyone else, I was overly eager to grab my pitchfork and start believing the worst. Wishful thinking mixed with Chinese whispers meant that the story was far more serious and advanced by the time it reached David. Though it's more likely to be in 6 months than in 6 days, Noisy Gobshite may well be prosecuted. Since I started, that represents the second correction. I promise to try to be a little more deliberate on next revisions. My error, not David's. David cautioned me that not everything that comes in your ears has to flow directly out of your tongue. You're very eager to feed the masses. Although they might believe you're currently farting rainbows, if you make a bollocks of the data, this won't last. Like always, he is correct. As uncomfortably customary. Information asked. A few have inquired about the fate of the sacked original site manager, but I wasn't sure until now. We met in the pub, David, the site manager, 2 others also. Subject to fidelity insurance checks, he most certainly has the new job. His starting date is February 9th. ACC paid him off in place of notice. Firing is done according to convention. They paid him just over 3.5 months' wages in one lump as his contract provided 3 months' notice and he was due 12 holiday/6/vacation days. He also gets to retain the car till March. I was shaking like a dog when he fired me, he added, but the wife reminded me that I could take my pension early and how much I hate that company, especially that dodgy pillage. I stopped worrying when the architect contacted me about the distribution center job. He started the new work on a somewhat better pay after landing it. The main drawback is that the employment is just guaranteed for 18 months. Although it's not certain, there's a great chance the organization will retain him following that if they have work. He first intended to bring Noisy Gobshite to an industrial tribunal for unjust dismissal. Now he won't since he won't suffer financially. Obviously, I'm glad I'm not losing money, he remarked, but I was looking forward to beating that Watson in court. He is building a better sleigh and several reindeer with the additional time right now. Certainly, a sleigh. It's on the rear of a truck. Father Christmas is on the sleigh performing Christmas carols at window-rattling volume, gathering money for charity while his company strolls the area decked as elves and snowmen. I have oftentimes been pulled into it. He brought David the promised whiskey. David advised he shouldn't, but the site manager remarked, "Why, Yorkshire men keep their word, even to a shower of soft shandy-sipping southerners like Ulan. Besides, I'm not risking breaking this lucky streak." Even the alcohol came at half price. Simultaneously pointing at him, David and I said, "A real Yorkshireman." For the uninitiated, Yorkshire residents are known for 2 things. Highly straightforward communication and financial restraint. We left the pub after ridiculing him for implying that I was a southerner and headed to the garage of the site manager so we could sip the whiskey and appreciate his sleigh building work. Would they send me some freebies if I told you all how great Cardhu Gold Reserve tastes? Born close to Carnarvon, Saeeglf, I'm Welsh and am sobbing and bith, hence you have most likely seen some awful grammar. I'm full of whiskey, so right now I'm debating. It is past my bedtime. 1 a.m. Bye for now. Update 7. I believe there might be some karmic justice en route. Interviews under control have been conducted with Noisy Gobshite. It indicates they are ready for the possibility rather than that they are absolutely suing him. They will also do so with the sacked site manager next week. They also followed the same process with the project manager. The site manager is sure he has nothing to concern about. He was sacked, hence the decision was taken to remove the pieces of roof support. He added he was sure the Noisy Gobshite would have sought to assign culpability to a site manager if he had been present at the time of the illegal modification. He said, "That cowardly slope-shouldered turd would have shot all over me to save his own skin." Fortunately, the project manager has evidence in the form of an email proving Noisy Gobshite ordered the task. Noisy Gobshite sought to convince him not to forward it on to the local authority planning department. He threatened him when that didn't work. That backfired when the project manager told the investigators that Noisy Gobshite instructed him to delete the email in addition to neglecting the risks. My buddy, a lawyer, informs me that destroying evidence and meddling with a witness are crimes in of themselves. Noisy Gobshite will not stop excavating a deeper hole. If he gets away without facing legal repercussions, I will be really let down. He is nevertheless, clearly in pain. The major story of the week? Noisy Gobshite has been let off. After learning from no less than 4 separate ACC workers, David announced it yesterday, Saturday. They eagerly wanted to tell him, he said. Then the discussion followed this pattern. Me? How is that feasible? How does the owner find himself let off? Did he stroll up to a mirror and declare, "You're as much use as Anne Frank's drum kit, you're fired"? David: Nope. You know he inherited the company from his uncle and dad. Me: Exactly. David said, You know his brother and cousin own a slice each. Me: Anyway. David: They fired him since their combined share is over 50%. Louise, the accounts manager, told me they are pissing their pants. As long as the money came in, they were content to leave noisy gobshites in charge, but today their golden goose seems very sick. Losing this contract and the fees and penalties scares them since it will close the company. They therefore ask the customer owner to bring ACC back to complete the deal. Part of that is persuading the building owner that noisy gobshite has nothing bearing on the business. Clearly, they are putting noisy gobshite beneath the bus. According to Louise, a noisy gobshite fired at him with screaming and violent threats. He required escort off the property. He has been phoning staff members, posing queries, and acts shocked when individuals refuse to assist him. Louise claims he truly wants to be loyal to him and thinks the staff like him. The man is in cloud cuckoo land, she declared. Me? He will be really offended. I wish I could have seen the face of Numpty as it was developing. David says, It's nothing that the scrot doesn't deserve. I promised the person who told me I wouldn't tell anyone yet, hence there is another, but I can't tell you about it. Me? You tease. What relevance does it have? David: It's significant. Transformational for the theme in life. Me? I wish I could tell you. It nearly gave me a hard-on. Me? Fing hell, it must be big if it can get that ugly appending to do anything except hang there like the last chicken in the shop. David: What a drama this is. She believes I should share with her this confidentially anything I learned. Given our marriage, she expects me to be able to tell her everything. I said it's not something I keep secret. Though I had hoped I would get, I appreciate you have integrity, dear husband. No. Mrs. here is enraged since she believes I'm a knobhead. Louise's employment title and name have been changed to defend the innocent. I don't want any of you holding your breath. It looks like it will be a few months before he can provide me with this fantastic news. The building owner, client has completed their inspection. 2 portions are unacceptable, the damage section and the one David ought to have completed but Stefan did instead. They are rather unhappy. Usually, the local government believes it's the owner cutting corners when listed structures are harmed. In this instance though, the owner is an austere ancient institution committed to maintaining significant structures. They didn't enjoy having to establish they had nothing to do with the building's damage as they are not used to being accused of anything dubious. David stated it appears they have written off ACC since they have made a type of tendering request to multiple other firms specialized in conservation. Then he spewed a bunch of jargon I neither knew or recall. Me? They have asked a few firms to quote a price for the job in simple English. David says, That's a very simplified way of describing it, but I don't have the time or the crayons to explain it to you. Me? Okay, let us say they are requesting job-related prices. Condescending, hence I was anticipating this tale would develop to a crescendo with noisy gobshites suffering something terrible. But it's just sort of faded with a whimper while we wait to find out what legal action will be pursued. Real life moves slowly, quite inconveniently. January 21, 2020. Hi there, this is Mark's wife. The moron requested me to apologize to the internet for his silence. On January 7th he was injured in an automobile accident. Though he won't be online for a little, we are confident he will fully recover. I explained it's only Reddit, but he's a compulsive freak about not disappointing others. I thus assured them I will include Reddit in the list. Here I am, informing all the folks he doesn't know why he hasn't finished imparting something they most likely aren't reading anyhow. March 2nd, 2020. Hello Mark, once more his wife. Direct messages numbered more than 200. I appreciate all of your remarks as well as your wishing of him well. I have read them all to him. I'll address the 3 most often asked questions. Mark's situation changed what? A big lorry drove straight into the rear of him while he was still stationary in his automobile about to exit the freeway. Between that lorry and the lorry ahead of Mark, his automobile was destroyed. Among his multiple shattered bones are nose, left orbital and cheekbone, left radius and ulna, forearm, left hand, right tibia and fibula, lower leg, and 4 ribs, one of which pierced his left lung. His left eye's center vision is somewhat damaged, however we hope this is transient. He needs more surgery since he has some tendon damage in his right hand and has 112 stitches overall. Though he looks like a wreck, he might heal free from any serious damage. If it were me, I wouldn't cope, But for as long as I have known him, he has always been as hard as nails. I went to pieces when I initially arrived at the hospital and he was lying there covered in blood, cables, and tubes and couldn't talk properly. In minutes, he had me giggling. He has always been really adept in knowing the appropriate response. Not being able to use his hands is the thing most bothering him right now. When ought he to change the narrative? It might take some time. Though I could ask the guy David contacted for an update, I most certainly cannot tell a narrative like Mark can. I'm obviously biased, but Mark seems to be the most entertaining man I have ever met. I start to laugh so much I cannot breathe as he and David get going. I have advised him to temporarily forget about everything but getting well. If it starts to disturb him though, I've told him I'll do some secretary role-playing and he may write the narrative to me. He will finish it. He always finishes what he starts on. I wish my self-discipline was 100th that of his. A few have inquired whether they might give him money, cards, or gifts to cover missed income or medical expenditures. Thank you so much for offering, but it's not necessary. As we live in the UK, fortunately healthcare is free. He wants none of anyone's money. There is a long-standing charity we have sponsored called Macmillan Cancer Support if anyone feels driven to do something. At last update, knowing who I am would help you. The David against boisterous gobshite narrative. The 22nd of May 2020. Slough mainly grunted, this username belonged to Mark, my spouse. He penned the narrative on his friend David and a company owner he referred to as noisy gobshite. Up until he was in a January vehicle accident, Mark had been updating the narrative. He requested me then to let everyone know he was hurt and to update the narrative after he recovered. Mark sadly died barely over a week after my previous comment. Everyone thought he was healing, but he passed out and died extremely rapidly without warning. Although the team did all they could to save him, his aorta had burst. They claimed it is not unusual in auto collisions and had most likely been damaged during the accident. Although I'm sorry I didn't update this earlier, to be honest I totally neglected this page. I discovered how many people were waiting for Mark to wrap up the narrative only after I returned to go over Mark's words once more. Though I'm not sure how many people will view this update, would you kindly forward this news to everyone you know who was waiting for Mark to respond? Many thanks. I appreciate the hundreds of people that posted get well notes for Mark. I'm sorry I ignored you all for so long. But for the past 3 months I've been bewildered. Mark would have chastised me and most certainly objected to my leaving everyone in uncertainty. Many thanks to the persons who sent Macmillan Cancer Support money. Though it seems odd to have money given in the name of mostly Gruntled. At last, I want to thank the moderators, especially /u/Marari01, for guiding me and outlining how I might notify everyone. Monday, May 24, 2020. For the wonderful messages and virtual hugs I have seen over the past day, I am most grateful. For hours I have shed tears. One finds it difficult to define what good sobbing is when one loses someone. Those who have lost a loved one will most likely relate. Most of today has been good tears thanks to your postings and comments. Your thoughts have helped me to consider all of Mark's amazing traits and all the reasons I so much loved him. I began working on the update, then gave up around 8 times before mustering some fortitude. I am rather happy I did it. I appreciate once more the final small push I required from the moderator, /u/Marari01. It also helps me understand that I wish to undertake one more activity Mark would have liked. He consistently brought his starting work to completion. I will find out what has happened by talking to his buddies. I'll try to get myself current with everyone's outcomes. I know some of it already. I tell you ahead of time, it will be merely the facts, not like Mark's writing. Though I lack Mark's natural storytelling ability, the comments clearly indicate that many people were hoping for a resolution. The bare facts will have to be sufficient, please forgive. I'm going to talk to David, the guy he contacted. This year he has been a total rock for me. With luck, he will be able to cover all. As soon as I can, I'll input the change. I greatly appreciate it all. You are unaware of the extent this has benefited. Friday, May 25, 2020. Mostly because to what you all wrote, yesterday I had a better day. I woke up today enraged and cannot seem to calm myself. England observes a public holiday today, and I find myself wondering what we would be doing if Mark were here. He never threw a holiday away. I'm furious since, just because some self-serving moron couldn't wait to respond to a text message, I have lost the best person I have ever known in my life. I find the stupidity and unfairness intolerable. He will spend a few years behind bars. Not one thing though, will bring my Mark back. Sorry folks. I simply needed to let out a vent. Please, kindly, avoid using your phone while driving. Also, avoid tolerating it if you notice others doing it. March 6, 2020. I want to highlight 2 points. Firstly, let me thank everyone for their comments. The lovely things you have spoken about Mark have cheered me. It took so long to tell you Mark had died since I never imagined they would. Still, you did help, even though what you said was so poignant that I broke down hundreds of times reading the great words. Second, I'm sorry for not yet answering every comment. On some days I feel I could talk about Mark all day. On others, I cannot even think of him without going to pieces. If I haven't replied to your particular comment, it's not as though I haven't read all of them. Simply said, I can't respond as I have been in a poor state portion of the time. Eventually, I will answer to everyone, much as I did very slowly with the cards during his funeral. It looked like I was climbing a mountain that wouldn't stop expanding, but I finally answered all 322 of them even though I didn't think I would get through them all. One of numerous decent habits I picked up from Mark is finishing what I start. I only want to hear him once more calling me Carrot. Carrot is a Welsh term for love. My name is not Welsh. July 27, 2020 at 3:10 a.m. Whoa, I hadn't been online for a few days and now hundreds of messages show up. I can't sleep once more, and it came to me that I could change what happened to every one of the characters Mark had penned. It's just the facts. It won't have Mark's style or humor, it's just basic knowledge. Still, it's the most I can accomplish and more than nothing. Starting in the new post on a building project for a distribution center, site manager followed plans exactly. Mark had already mentioned what David and the site manager were dissatisfied about. Though that was before the coronavirus, being on a fixed 18-month contract as a self-employed individual was a drawback when compared to being an employee. Most of the staff were let go after the virus struck. Some were furloughed. The contract required the corporation to maintain paying the site manager whole. What he considered to be a negative aspect turned out to be a saving agent. The last David could tell me about Noisy Gobshite was that he no longer owns a third as he had to sell his part of the company under pressure. Regarding his assets, he had to sign a personal liability agreement in case total obligations exceeded the company's worth. According to what I understand of it, Noisy Gobshite must pay the extra, even if it means he loses his house, if for example, the total bills for his mistakes are higher than the company can pay. They couldn't continue trading if he was participating, hence he had to give up his part of the company. He needs them to carry on paying the attorneys. Though he hasn't been charged with a crime yet, he most certainly will. Something to do with wanting to be ready to go to court once he is charged. They take their time researching and being ready before they charge him. It also came to light that he warned of similar, but somewhat more minor, damage to a listed property in 2011. According to David, some anomalies found by the local government during the inquiry were forwarded to HMRC, the taxman. Also under investigation for that scam is Noisy. One of the first remarks on Mark's post was expensive cup of coffee, an understatement if ever I've seen one. The major headlines would be on Noisy Gobshite and the sexual assault, rape, of one of the PAs in the ACC headquarters in 2017 as well as sexual harassment of other employees. Though it wasn't boisterous Gobshite, the sexual assault occurred. It was former finance director. Stories of sexual harassment of female employees have not evolved and proved to be mere gossip. David. Working on his own and without social distance problems, he's most likely one of the few persons who were not impacted by the COVID-19 epidemic both financially and practically. He has carried on rather as normal. Job is easier, he stated. The usual plonkers are not there to trip on my equipment or stick plank ends into my finished work. David is not doing personally very well. David took Mark's death worse than anyone else outside his family. He tries not to show me this. He is a rock when he is with me. He has kept me from falling. Among 3 persons, he is the one I feel I can truly let go concerning Mark, or so I thought. David's wife was really nice and empathetic when I spoke with her last week, but she had to tell me to hold back a little with David. Although his wife claims he is shattering, he seems strong to me. She says he has taken Mark's death extremely severely. I thought he and Mark were close friends. She claims that in all their marriage, she only saw him cry once, that of their dog's death. When his parents deceased, she missed him crying. She notes he seems lost now and has sobbed quite a few times. The worst thing to find out is that his crying period falls after his visit with me. I'm awful. He obviously was mourning, but I had no idea I was burdening him so much. I'm going to cease venting all my suffering and be more cautious utilizing him. I wish he had said sooner. Maybe I should have known about it instead of being so self-servingly preoccupied with my own loss. That is as far as I'm aware of the updates cover. They are ready to observe his charged with noise. Should he be found guilty of damaging classified buildings, he might find himself imprisoned. Should he be found guilty of fraud, he will almost surely be imprisoned. In either case, the fines will be 6 figures. David mentioned wondering whether he would like prison coffee. His sense of humor is dark. July 27, 2020, at 3:10 a.m., there were alerts for 512 private messages and comments when I first arrived online earlier. I have no idea where to start. If you have written, kindly please not assume I am not appreciative as I have not responded. I felt fit to write at 3:10 a.m., hence I updated. Right now I doubt I could accomplish it. I have been staring at our weddings video. Though I believed it might help, I feel like a bus has knocked me down. I was devastated by Mark's speech. He discussed our meeting and his return to the house he shared with fellow Royal Marines. One among them asked Mark, "What's the joke then? You're once more smiling about something. Come on, what's so funny here?" Mark claimed he couldn't and wouldn't explain it to them, he just couldn't stop smiling every time he considered our date. Every time he thought of me, he claimed, he felt that. It made me grin and started me to cry on our wedding day, but this morning it broke me. I believe the agony is growing worse rather than becoming less. It bothers me too. All through me I feel it. I can't stop it. All I can think of lately is wish I had been in the car with him if I cannot have him back. Being an atheist, he always advised, this is all you get, so don't dare waste any of it. Therefore he wouldn't approve of me harming myself. It's just so difficult to keep going with this suffering. I doubt I can. I simply want it stopped. I apologize for carrying on like way. I would convey this to those I know since they worry, but writing here is like shouting into a diary. I apologize to all of you. Though I try to control things, I miss him so much and I can't stop it hurting. What should I do is unknown. August 31st, 2020 is. Although I responded to hundreds of messages since last updating this post, I did not get through all of them. Though the screen says I still have 92 waiting. I cannot see or read any more of the messages in chat. Should you not obtain a response, you fall into the 92. Our anniversary yesterday, August 30th. Though I was looking forward it, when it came it was sort of empty. I cried when I viewed our wedding film. I replied to a few messages. Halfway through one message, I became abruptly overwhelmed with the knowledge that all the happiness I will ever experience in my life had already passed by. Every future endeavor I try will just be rewritten as Mark should be here but he isn't. Everything from here till I die is simply life. Just breathing and watching the days pass. Without Mark, it seems quite meaningless. I'm not sure whether I could write ever more. I appreciate all of you volunteering your time. You're really beautiful folks. Clutch the people you love like you might lose tomorrow. Avoid doing what I did and believe you could live in your own little heavenly bubble always. In the blink of an eye, some lazy morons can destroy all you love, leaving nothing ahead of you. Bye. My parents tried to give my inheritance to their favorite daughter, but my grandparents had a surprising twist in store. Male 28-year-old comes from a family with a convoluted and long history of favoritism. My younger sister Amy, 25, has always been preferred by my parents, especially Dad, over me. Starting in our childhood, this partiality only got worse as we grew up. Amy was the golden child from my earliest memories. Our parents threw her an elaborate birthday party including professional face painters, a bouncy castle, and a petting zoo when I was 5 and she was 2. I had a store-bought cake and a little family supper for my birthday that same year. This helped to define the tone for years to come. The differences became clearer as we aged. Amy always received the newest toys, the greatest clothes and most attention. I recall saving months of allowance for a new bike when I was 10 years old. Amy wanted one too, hence she had a fit when she saw it. Rather of educating her about waiting or saving, my parents went right out and got her an even nicer bike than mine. Another arena where the bias was evident was school. Amy's parents attended all of her school functions, while they usually missed mine. I took front stage in the school play in 4th grade. I practiced for weeks, driven by great enthusiasm. My parents arrived an hour late on the night of the play, therefore missing my major scene. They were consoling Amy after she complained of stomachache. She was good later on, they had simply lost count of time playing with her. Regarding academics, nothing I ever appeared to do seemed sufficient. I joined the math club, often received straight A's in middle school, and even took first place in a regional science fair. Though my parents hardly noticed these successes, they gave Amy a celebratory dinner and purchased her a new phone as encouragement to keep getting better when she scored a B+ on one test in her weakest subject. In particular, high school was difficult. With an eye toward their approval, I put myself into whatever activity I could. Along with keeping a 4.0 GPA, I was editor of the school newspaper, debate team captain. Amy coasted through school, hardly keeping a C average, and spent much of her time hanging out with friends. I was chosen from our university as one of 2 junior year applicants to participate in a famous summer program at Harvard. It was such an honor, and I felt great. My dad grumbled and moved the topic to Amy's forthcoming dancing performance when I told the news over supper. At least my mother remarked, "That's nice," but she moved on fast. My parents couldn't bring me to the airport on the night Amy's concert fell on the same day I was leaving Harvard, as they wanted to see Amy perform. I asked the parents of a friend for a ride. Another agonizing experience was the college application process. I worked months on improving my essays, engaged in extracurricular activities, and SAT preparation. Several elite colleges accepted me, and I was given a sizable scholarship to my ideal college. When I told my parents about this at supper, their reaction was barely passable. "That's good, but don't let it run to your head. College isn't everything," my dad advised. "Just remember about us when you're off becoming a big shot," my mother said. On the other hand, my parents were quite understanding when Amy barely passed high school and chose not to attend college. They admired her for knowing herself and for defying social expectations. Something they never done for me, they even paid for her a car as a graduation gift. Emotionally, this persistent favoritism suffered me greatly. Over my teens and early 20s, I battled anxiety and despair. Beginning therapy in college, I came to realize that my parents' actions were not my fault. Years of effort were needed to develop my self-esteem and learn to validate myself rather than depending on my parents' approval. My immediate family did not help me, yet I still managed to lead a decent life. By the time I finished from college with honors, I had a decent job in finance, and even purchased my own house by 27 years old. Though my parents aren't, I'm glad of what I've accomplished. Here then, is where the current drama begins. On Dad's side, my grandfather died not too long ago. He left a sizable estate and was a successful businessman who started from nothing. In his will, he split his possessions equally among his grandchildren, including me, Amy, and our cousins, as well as his children, Dad and his siblings. My portion of the bequest was significant, roughly $500,000. It would have let me invest in my future, pay off my education loans, and perhaps even launch my own company someday. This unanticipated windfall and the chances it could present made me happy. When the will was read, though, my parents clearly became agitated. Later, they drew me aside and said they felt it was unjust I received an equal portion. Amy, who lives in our parents' basement and works part-time at a coffee shop, said she needed the money more since she was suffering. Though stunned, I attempted to keep cool. I clarified that Grandpa made this decision. They had no say on how he decided. They insisted I should act morally and give Amy my fair part. They became enraged when I turned down and began guilt-tripping me, calling me unappreciative and selfish. Every incident my dad could recall where they had helped me came under discussion. Though I worked part-time to help with finances, he emphasized paying for my medically necessary braces, buying me school supplies, the bare minimum, and allowing me reside at home during college. He conveniently forgot about the car they bought Amy, the many shopping sprees, and the fact they still support her at 2025. The matter got rapidly more serious. Acting as the will's executor, my dad chose to handle things himself. Along with her own inheritance, he declared he would be interpretation Grandpa's intentions and give Amy my whole part. He said Grandpa would have wished if he had known our unique situation. I was broken. This was not only obviously illegal but also a terrible reminder of how little my parents thought of me. Pointing that Grandpa had always treated all his grandchildren equally and that he was aware of our circumstances, I tried to reason with them. Then my mother accused me of speaking ill of the deceased by implying Grandpa would have preferred anything else than what my dad was advocating. I mentioned certain memories of Grandpa pushing my academic and career goals, but my parents brushed off these as misinterpretation. They said Grandpa wanted to make sure Amy was taken care of and had privately voiced worry about her future. They had no response when I asked why he hadn't simply penned the will that way then. Amy, for her part, was awkward about the circumstances but did not voice criticism of our parents. She merely shrugged and said, "Mom and Dad know best." When I tried to chat to her alone, she obviously wasn't going to be much help. Feeling misled and wounded, I asked Grandpa's widow, my paternal grandma, for guidance. Hearing what was happening, she became enraged. She informed me that my parents had no authority to alter the will and that this was exactly not what Grandpa had planned. Grandma sent some material that clarifies the matter. Several years ago, apparently, my parents asked Grandpa to give everything to Amy in his will. Grandpa had steadfastly objected, saying he thought all of his grandchildren should be treated equally. He had even included a stipulation in his will declaring that anyone challenging the equitable distribution would lose their portion. Equipped with this knowledge, I challenged my parents. Grandma's disclosure of their earlier attempt to affect the will startled them. Saying they were only looking out Amy's future helped my dad try to defend it, but I could see the guilt on their faces. Grandmother acted right away. She got in touch with her will's other executors and attorney. She also got in touch with my dad's siblings, who shared her equally strong indignation at what he was attempting. Taken together, they stopped my dad's scheme and guaranteed that the will would be carried out as stated. Though they are unhappy with me, my parents were obliged to back off. They argued I should have handled this in-house instead of involving others and accused me of turning the family against me. My mother sobbed over how I had split the family and deceived them. I said I had never expected anything from them anyway, when my dad threatened to cut me out of their will totally. Now, should I accept the inheritance, they are threatening to break off all communication. My dad even went so far as to suggest that I would not be welcome in their house should I inherit it. In a particularly low blow, my mother remarked that my acceptance of the money reveals that I never truly loved them and was merely ready to profit from their passing. The matter splits the extended family. A few of my cousins are encouraging since they understand the long-standing favoritism and value me for advocating myself. Others believe I should have yielded in order to preserve peace since family harmony comes first over financial considerations. Although my dad's siblings are definitely on my side, this has strained their relationship as well as my parents. Amy finds herself enmeshed in all this. She confided in me privately that although she feels bad and didn't ask for this, she is not ready to challenge our parents. She's been trained her whole life to depend on them and seek their praise, hence I don't blame her totally. Still, a part of me longs she would help me just once. This circumstance has brought out a lot of past suffering and bitterness. I find myself remembering all the times I was passed over or discounted in favor of Amy, the birthday celebrations I missed, the school functions my parents missed, the successes that went unreported. This one occurrence seems to be bringing to a head a lifetime of unfairness. Though the whole affair has caused a great divide in the family, I am keeping my ground and want to take my inheritance as Grandpa meant. My parents hardly talk to me, and family get-togethers have grown awkward. I missed our monthly family meal last week for the first time ever since I could stand the cold shoulders and accusing glares. Though there is turmoil, a tiny bit of me feels empowered. I'm confronting the unfair treatment by my parents for the first time in my life. I'm declaring my value and refuse to be written off. It's both terrible and freeing at once. Though I think I'm in the right here, the family drama is draining me. Something I hadn't experienced since college, I have started having anxiety attacks once more. To assist handle all this stress, I'm thinking about returning to therapy. Am I the one who should have refused to comply with my parents' expectations and accepted my inheritance? Should I have simply handed Amy the money to maintain peace? Although I'm bored of being the family scapegoat, I also fear losing my family totally. Any guidance or viewpoint would be much valued. Update. Since my first post 6 months ago, a lot has happened. I want to thank everyone for their support and guidance. It truly kept me strong during trying circumstances. Let me start with the legal aspect of things. Many of you advised, and I did see my own attorney. He verified that I had every right to inherit and that what my dad attempted was in fact illegal. He helped me record everything and ready to act legally should needed. Fortunately, things did not transpire as such. Along with my dad's siblings, my grandma and her attorney worked out matters without involving court. I got my whole fortune and the will was carried out exactly as intended. Because of his will manipulation attempts, my dad was removed as an executor. This was a somewhat demanding process spanning several weeks. My parents threatened litigation, there were tense meetings and furious phone calls, but ultimately the law was unambiguous and they had to back off. Still ongoing though, the family fallout has been noteworthy. At first, my parents doubled down on their viewpoint. They charged me with being avaricious and neglectful of my sister. They also sought to mobilize other family members against me, disseminating allegations that I had somehow coerced Grandpa into giving me money. Luckily, most of the family saw through their trickery. About 1 month following the will's acceptance, there was one really unpleasant occurrence at a family gathering. When my parents showed there unannounced, my aunt was hosting and hadn't asked them to come. They started a scene. Starting to shout about how I had taken from Amy and corrupted Grandma against her, my dad became saying I had ruined all these wonderful memories. My mother flung an old photo album squarely at my feet. It was awkward and terrible. It took several relatives to cool things down and persuade my parents to leave. Bless her heart, my grandmother turned out to be my most powerful supporter over all of this. She related tales of how my grandfather had always been pleased of my achievements and how he especially wanted to make sure all his grandchildren had equal chances. She even said Grandpa had maintained a scrapbook of my accomplishments, newspaper clippings of academic honors, copies of my college acceptance letters, And even the program from that university play my parents had been late for. This insight was sad as well as wonderful. Grandma also volunteered to straighten the records with the wider family. She organized a family gathering excluding my parents, laying out the entire history of my parents' partiality, including events I had long forgotten or never ever heard about. Having someone at last recognize the unfairness I had gone through for years was vindicating, but it also reopened old scars. About my sister Amy, she at last found her voice in all this. She came to me personally and apologized for not sticking up for me earlier after some soul-searching and several long talks with our grandmother. She said she thought our parents' preference was improper, but she had been too terrified to confront it. We discussed our childhood and how it influenced both of us in great length and emotional intensity. Amy admitted that being the favorite child wasn't as wonderful as it seemed. She never learned how to stand on her 2 feet and felt great pressure to live up to our parents' expectations. She told tales of times she yearned to accomplish things on her own, but our parents would swoop in and handle everything for her, therefore depriving her of the opportunity to develop and learn from her mistakes. For our relationship, this talk marked a sea change. We began to mend the sibling link our parents' partiality had broken. Just the two of us have been routinely meeting for coffee to discuss and encourage one another through this family crisis. Declaring that she was going to pay for college with her inheritance astonished everyone. She claimed seeing me stand up for myself motivated her to start managing her own life. Once she decided what she wanted to study, she registered in a nearby community college, first intending to transfer to a 4-year university. Our parents let out startled gasps. They knew, I believe, that their babying had not done Amy any favors. The response of my parents to all this has been diverse and changing. They first attacked both of us angrily. They tried to guilt Amy into quitting college to help the family since they said I turned her against them. They changed strategy when that proved ineffective. After several protracted talks with my grandmother and seeing Amy's great transformation, my mother began to recognize how damaging their actions had been. She has made some hesitant moves toward reconciliation, even beginning therapy to address her problems. She got in touch to apologies, owning that she had been unfair and requesting a chance to right things. It's a slow process, and while I'm gently hopeful, I'm also keeping strong limits. Sadly, my dad has been less likely to own any mistakes. Still furious, he feels as though he is the victim in all this. He has been chilly toward Amy since she chose to go college and hardly speaks to me. He has tried a few times to control us, threatening to sell our childhood house should we fail to come to our senses or forgiving us should we realize we were wrong. Although we are both standing strong, it hurts to see him distance both of his children like this. The dynamics among the extended family have changed dramatically. I now live closer to my dad's siblings, who have been quite helpful, and my grandmother. Having heard from my aunts and uncles about handling my dad's challenging conduct over the years, it has lessened my loneliness in this fight. Deeper bonds with some of my cousins who stood by me have also developed. Starting a monthly cousin meal allows us to all catch up free from the drama of the older generations. For myself, I have been making sensible use of my inheritance. Having paid off my college loans, I now feel an amazing degree of financial freedom. Working with a financial advisor, I have assembled a varied investment portfolio. I have also set aside some funds to maybe launch my own company some years forward. Opening a community center with reasonably priced mental health treatments and financial literacy seminars is something I'm investigating. But for me, buying therapy for myself and volunteering to do the same for Amy has been the most significant application of the money. Both of us are learning to set reasonable limits with our parents and are working on healing from our childhood events. Though it's a long road, I already feel as though I'm developing in knowledge and ability to overcome emotional neglect and long-term partiality. This whole process has brought some surprising good improvements into my life. I now know a great deal about establishing limits and defending myself. Though I know I did the right thing, it hasn't been easy and there are still difficult days. I feel good about myself for resisting guilt and pressure. Among the most unexpected results has been a change in my work path. Dealing with all this family conflict and undergoing therapy has helped me to see my own passion about supporting people who, dealing with all this family dysfunction and doing therapy has helped me to see how driven I am about supporting others who have gone through same family dynamics. Currently thinking about returning to school to specialize in adult children of emotionally immature parents and work as a family therapist. I have also been helping youngsters from challenging family homes at a nearby youth facility. Being able to offer the kind of encouragement and support I wish I had had as a youngster is immensely satisfying. I'm even considering creating a scholarship fund for children from same circumstances using some of my inheritance. My contact with Amy has kept getting better. Once a month, we have a siblings day when we do something entertaining, just the two of us. Our hiking and picnic last month was the most laid back and connected we had felt since we were small children. Without our parents' influence, we are gently reconstructing our connection on our own terms. Regarding my parents, things remain tricky. Our relationship has been trying to be rebuilt by my mom. She has been routinely attending therapy and has even begun to see some of the damage her favoritism brought about. We have had a few one-on-one lunches when we have had some honest, though challenging talks regarding our past and forward direction. Though it's not flawless, improvement is evident. My dad still objects to change though. He still says he done nothing illegal and that Amy and I should be appreciative. He refuses to be in the same room with me, hence he missed several family functions. Though it hurts, I am trying to let go of my need to compel him to see things differently or control his reactions. For both Amy and me, Grandma now serves as a rock. She has been sharing additional tales about our grandfather and his pride of us for advocating for ourselves. She always supports justice and understanding, thus she has been a fantastic mediator in family problems. The whole process has imparted a lot of lessons about the actual meaning of family. I've come to see that occasionally the family you select might be more encouraging than the one you were raised in. Along with developing a close-knit circle of friends who have been quite helpful along this journey, I have grown closer to my aunts, uncles, and cousins who stood by me. Setting limits and practicing self-care have also become more crucial to me. I'm growing better at saying no to circumstances that compromise my mental health, and I no longer feel bad about giving my personal well-being top priority. I was so preoccupied with trying to achieve my parents' favor that I had always put off investigating new interests and hobbies. To those in same circumstances, I would wish to advise not let someone make you feel bad about getting what is rightly yours. Even if it generates controversy, it's reasonable to defend yourself. Though family dynamics might be complex, you are deserving of fair treatment. Remember, you never have too late to begin developing the life you are due. See a therapist if necessary. Surround yourself with encouraging people. And don't hesitate to establish limits. Who you are personally defines your value, not how your family treats you. I want to thank each of you once more for your suggestions and encouragement. It meant more than what you would have known during a really trying period. Although the road has not been simple, I am excited about the future and confident in self-assurance I have not experienced in years. Where this new chapter of my life will lead excites me, and I am resolved to stop the pattern of favoritism and build better relationships in my own future family. Regarding my parents, things remain tricky. Our relationship has been trying to be rebuilt by my mom. She has been routinely attending therapy and has even begun to see some of the damage her favoritism brought about. We have had a few one-on-one lunches when we have had some honest, though challenging talks regarding our past and forward direction. Though it's not flawless, improvement is evident. My dad still objects to change though. He still says he done nothing illegal and that Amy and I should be appreciative. He refuses to be in the same room with me, hence he missed several family functions. Though it hurts, I am trying to let go of my need to compel him to see things differently or control his reactions. For both Amy and me, Grandma now serves as a rock. She has been sharing additional tales about our grandfather and his pride of us for advocating for ourselves. She always supports justice and understanding, thus she has been a fantastic mediator in family problems. The whole process has imparted a lot of lessons about the actual meaning of family. I've come to see that occasionally the family you select might be more encouraging than the one you were raised in. Along with developing a close-knit circle of friends who have been quite helpful along this journey, I have grown closer to my aunts, uncles, and cousins who stood by me. Setting limits and practicing self-care have also become more crucial to me. I'm growing better at saying no to circumstances that compromise my mental health, and I no longer feel bad about giving my personal well-being top priority. I was so preoccupied with trying to achieve my parents' favor that I had always put off investigating new interests and hobbies. To those in same circumstances, I would wish to advise not let someone make you feel bad about getting what is rightly yours. Even if it generates controversy, it's reasonable to defend yourself. Though family dynamics might be complex, you are deserving of fair treatment. Remember, you never have too late to begin developing the life you are due. See a therapist if necessary. Surround yourself with encouraging people. And don't hesitate to establish limits. Who you are personally defines your value, not how your family treats you. I want to thank each of you once more for your suggestions and encouragement. It meant more than what you would have known during a really trying period. Although the road has not been simple, I am excited about the future and confident in self-assurance I have not experienced in years. Where this new chapter of my life will lead excites me, and I am resolved to stop the pattern of favoritism and build better relationships in my own future family. My mom favored my sister and ignored me. In the end, my perfect sister ran off with mom's money, leaving her devastated. I was 23 years old and lived at home with my mom, 52 years old, and older sister, 26 years old. This manner of life persisted after my dad's death 5 years ago. Emma, my sister, was mom's favorite from the beginning. Anyone who spent even 5 minutes with our family could see this. It wasn't just me. When she was a kid, Emma was the center of attention and the recipient of all the newest fashions and technology. Even though mom never missed an Emma school function, she would make up an excuse like, "I'm too tired," or "I have to work late," whenever I asked her to attend my own. Eventually, I grew accustomed to the pain. There was little change as we aged. While Emma attended a prominent university to get a law degree, I got my associate's degree in graphic design from a small college. Emma was the object of mom's incessant boasting. "My Emma is going to be a big-shot lawyer one day," she would proudly proclaim. All the while, people either didn't care or were downright disappointed by my chosen work path. However, the true problem wasn't merely favoritism, it was the unequal allocation of domestic duties. I was supposed to handle all the housework since Emma was supposed to be studying. When I say all, I really do mean it. I would begin my day at 6 o'clock every morning. Making breakfast would be my first order of business. Emma favored a vegetable omelet accompanied by a serving of fruit, while mom liked her eggs cooked to perfection with toast and no crust. In my regular state, I would hastily seize a granola bar for my own consumption. Before going out to my part-time job at a nearby coffee shop, I would tidy up the kitchen, wash the dishes and begin a load of laundry after breakfast. Despite mom's lack of request, I worked there to help out around the house and save up for my own place. I would do everything from dusting to mopping, vacuuming, and everything in between as soon as I got home in the afternoon. Meal planning and grocery buying were also my responsibilities. This was never easy because both mom and Emma had very specific nutritional needs. Even the dinner was a show. While Emma sat on the couch, fiddling with her phone, I would whip up extravagant dinners. Talking to her mom about her day, school, and future goals was a regular occurrence. Word of mouth would be an uphill battle for me. Guess who had to do the dishes after supper? I am, once again. Mom would give me a disapproving look and say things like, "Your sister needs to focus on her studies," whenever I ventured to complain or ask for assistance. One day, she will have a prosperous life and be able to provide for all of us. Assisting around the house would be the bare minimum you can do. Emotionally and physically, it was draining. While Emma was free to unwind and have fun, I felt like a housekeeper in my own house, rushing around all the time. Worst part was that mom was completely unconcerned with my attempts. From that point on, it was Emma this, and Emma that. Things reached a boiling point on a certain day. I was hoping to reconnect with some college pals that day, because it was a Saturday. Our design class was going to have us work on a collaborative project. The opportunity to leave the house and engage in social interaction that did not include serving coffee or doing chores was more than enough to make me look forward to it all week, and not only because of the project. As is my habit, I got up bright and early to finish my errands before I left. My mom walked into the kitchen just as I was preparing breakfast. "Oh great, you're awake," she remarked. "Today, I'm counting on you to give the living room a good scrub. We need to scrub the carpet and remove and wash the curtains." My chest ached. "But Mom," I said, "today I am scheduled to..." "Remember when I told you about our group project?" Mom scowled. "You can reschedule, right? Do not overlook this. Next week we have company coming over, and I would like the house to be spotless." In an effort to maintain composure, I inhaled deeply. "We will have to reschedule. This has been in the works for weeks. Perhaps Emma could pitch in and clean a little." It was almost 10 in the morning when Emma, seemingly at a whim, strolled into the kitchen still dressed in her pajamas. "Morning," she said with a yawn as she reached for a muffin from the platter I had just placed. Turning to Emma, Mom's expression softened. "Hello there, darling. Had a good night's sleep? Rest assured, there will be an online study group meeting later on." With a muffin still in her mouth, Emma nodded. Mom redirected her gaze to me, her face becoming even more stern. "Your sister needs to get some serious schoolwork done. No one should expect her to clean. Her education is of the utmost importance to you." Something inside of me snapped. Every bit of pent-up resentment, animosity, and pain finally burst forth. "And what about my education?" I spoke more loudly as I inquired. "What will happen to my plans? This is my life. Isn't their significance immense?" Mom appeared surprised. To which she responded, "Of course they matter, but..." I interrupted her. "But it's still not equal to Emma's, is it? Never on par with Emma's." Finally speaking up was Emma, who had been observing this discussion with wide eyes. "Stop including me in this, please. When mom wants you to help out around the house, it's not my fault. I was already furious before that. Although you have never once offered to lend a hand, please don't take this personally. Sit back and enjoy the ride. Mom made an effort to step in. Now let's all calm down, there's no need to. Still, I was feeling very well at the moment. I was helpless as years of suppressed feelings finally broke out. No more settling down for me, Mom. I've had enough of being the housekeeper. Treating me like Emma is beneath me and I'm sick of it. Everything, including the partiality and unreasonable expectations, has had enough of me. I looked across at Emma. Why does Mom never ask you to help out with housework? Her reasoning is that she believes you have great potential to become wealthy and provide for her in the years to come. It's quite the burden, isn't it? But well, at least I'm doing all the work, so you can relax. Redness spread across Emma's face. You can't be fair. My education are a top priority for me. And I don't? My response was a rapid one. In addition to schooling and taking care of the house, I'm working part-time. When will it be safe to think about the future? Again, Mom attempted to intervene. You are aware, my darling, that we value all that you do? The difference is that Emma's chosen profession will, in the end, pay off more handsomely. A slap in the face was the feeling I got from such remarks. Is that all? Is the amount of money I could make in the future the only thing that matters to this family? Mom swiftly reversed her course. No, it is not my intention. Compared to what you're studying, a job in law offers more stability. Coloring and design, Mom. One of my majors is graphic design. Is it so important that you've taken the time to research my life goals and aspirations? I knew exactly what to do based on Mom's expression. She was unconcerned. Without ever truly comprehending it, she had dismissed my career path. I pushed back the tears that threatened to well up in my eyes. At this very moment, I would not weep. What do you think? That's it. Today I will not be cleaning the living room. I intend to get down with my pals and get some stuff done on my project. Plus, I'm leaving the house until we have a serious talk about how things work here when I return. I then snatched my suitcase and bolted from the kitchen, leaving Mom and Emma standing there in disbelief. A strange feeling of relief mingled with fury and hurt as I banged the front door shut behind me. I had finally spoken out for myself after what felt like an eternity. The remainder of the day slipped my mind. In an effort to forget about the argument from earlier, I got together with my pals and dove headfirst into our project. The day progressed though, and uncertainties began to arise. Did I react too strongly? Had I been self-centered? Perhaps I should have simply rearranged my plans and cleaned up as Mom requested. Note, I got back to my house that night, emotionally and intellectually drained by the day's events, but still intent on keeping my word and having that serious talk. But the tension was palpable the moment I stepped through the door. When I walked into the living room, neither Mom nor Emma gave me a second look. With some hesitation, I spoke up and asked, "Hey, can we talk?" No sound. Both of them peered intently at the television, but it was clear that neither of them was paying attention. I gathered my courage, inhaled deeply, and chose to go ahead anyhow. Listen, I get that you had a long morning, but I feel like we have to talk about this. Emma, all I'm asking is that you pitch in a bit more with the housework. I would feel more comfortable if we were treated fairly. Mom finally turned to look at me, her face showing no emotion. I think you've said quite enough already. Emma interjected, her tone betraying her contempt. Indeed, your voice was clearly audible to us earlier today. You're envious of my future prospects and me. How egocentric are you? I was hit square in the stomach. Is it egocentric? Asking for aid isn't selfish in any way. Grandma scowled. It's like you're breaking the silence in this house. Her education should be Emma's top priority. You're simply envious because you're aware that your small pastime won't be very successful. Hobby. I said it again, my jaw dropping. Graphic design is a real career, Mom, if you'd ever bothered to learn about it. Enough, Mom interrupted me. I won't have you disrespecting us like this in our own home. Abashed, I remained still. It had been my sincere wish that they would have considered my words and come to terms with how unfair things had been. Nevertheless, they redoubled their efforts. Our very own home, I murmured again. I see. I suppose it's no longer my home. I retreated to my room after saying nothing further. I returned outside after stowing a few articles of clothing and necessities in a bag and retrieving my laptop. Mom and Emma continued to stare fixedly at me from the living room. I'll be at Sarah's, I texted, mentioning my college best buddy. I'll come back for the rest of my stuff later. Relieved and heartbroken all at once, I slammed the door behind me. Unfortunately, I needed some breathing room to figure out what to do next, so I resorted to this temporary measure. Unlike at Sarah's, I wouldn't be made to feel like an inferior or treated like a maid. I have no idea what the future holds, but I am certain that I'm entitled to better than this. I should begin to believe that now. Update. I must admit, leaving my family home has been an eye-opening experience. It has been approximately 3 months since I made the move. My friend Sarah has been my roommate, and we've been dividing up the rent and housework evenly. Everything I do on a daily basis has changed. Since I no longer have to worry about taking care of the house, I've had more time than ever before to devote to my education and my emerging profession as a graphic designer. I've interned at a regional marketing agency, finished a number of freelance jobs, and am now building my portfolio. When you're not worn out from being a maid for other people, you can do so much. However, unexpected events do happen in life. While grocery shopping last week, I unexpectedly ran into Mrs. Johnson, our neighbor. She looked worried and wanted to know how I was doing before she inquired about Mom. Evidently, she had observed Mom's recent struggles and apparent overwhelm while tending to the yard. According to Mrs. Johnson, your mother insisted she was fine, despite her offer of assistance. I was under the impression that Emma was assisting her. A wave of shame and anger washed over me. Obviously, Emma was making everything worse. Since when would she begin? The most shocking thing, though, wasn't even that. In her usual gossipy but well-intentioned manner, Mrs. Johnson spilled yet another bombshell. And how is Emma's academic progress coming along? I pray that the incident involving Professor Andrews has not had a significant impact on her. Mrs. Johnson's eyes expanded, so I must have appeared perplexed. Oh no, I guess you were aware. Professor Andrews and Emma have been spotted all over town together quite a bit. There has been discussion. Feeling disoriented, I thanked Mrs. Johnson and limped out of the store. My ideal sister Emma was careening around with a professor instead of concentrating on her promising legal career. The neighbors even took note and started chatting about it. So it must have been really major. I was unhappy most of the time, but there was a twisted satisfaction in there somehow. The golden child wasn't all that golden after all. It broke my heart to see Mom trying to get everything done that I used to do on her alone. Tragic for Emma, who put her career in jeopardy for a professor's romance. I felt terrible for our family since it appeared like everything was coming to a crumbling end without me. Given this data, I am unsure of my next steps. While a part of me longs to make amends and reach out, another part recalls the pain and years of inferiority and questions whether it's worthwhile. My personal development and recovery are my current priorities. Self-worth and my chosen profession are becoming more apparent to me. A life where my worth is recognized and my efforts are valued is something I'm working toward. Perhaps Mom and Emma will come to terms with what they've lost in due time. Perhaps they will not. I used to try so hard to win their favor, but now that I'm on my own, I recognize that it was a mistake. The circle of life always seems to close, doesn't it? When I finally felt like I had things under control 6 months later, life decided to throw me another curveball. My phone rang on a peaceful Sunday night while I worked on a freelancing assignment. Yeah, Mom. Since my departure, we hadn't had many conversations, so I was hesitant to respond. My mother's inconsolable wailing greeted me when I took up the phone. Mom, what's wrong? My pulse pounding, I inquired. She choked out, Emma's gone, as she sobbed. She took the most of my savings when she ran off with a boy from her university. The sensation was as if someone had doused me with icy water. Hearing that Emma had done something so careless and damaging was upsetting since, despite everything, she was still my sister. I'm coming over, I announced, hastily retrieving my keys. My heart nearly burst at the sight of my childhood house when I arrived. Compared to the spotless home Mom had usually kept, the house was in utter disarray. Even though it had just been a few months, Mom appeared to have aged significantly. She started crying again the second she laid eyes on me. I couldn't make sense of the conflicting feelings coursing through me as I comforted her while she sobbed. Mom gave me a glance with crimson-rimmed eyes once she cooled down. I've been so foolish, she whispered. The last several months have really enlightened me. I was completely mistaken on a lot of things, including you and Emma. She grasped both of my hands. Even though you were the reliable one who I could always rely on, I failed to recognize your worth and instead treated you like a commodity. My deepest apologies, my love. My own eyes started to brim up with tears. I never imagined I would get this kind of recognition, yet here it was. I want you, even though I know I don't deserve it, Mom went on to say. Are you thinking about returning home? Trust me when I say things are going to change. Looking at Mom, vulnerable and sincerely sorry, made me realize I couldn't turn my back on her. no matter how much I wanted to deny in order to shield myself from more harm. "All right, Mom," I whispered. "I'll come back, but things really do need to be different this time." A wave of relief swept over her as she enthusiastically nodded. "They will be, I promise." Now I find myself back in my childhood home. It's weird, unsettling, yet somehow soothing all at once. My mother and I are working on improving our communication and mutual appreciation. My graphic design work has captured her attention, and she has even asked me to teach her the basics. Collaboratively, we are cleaning up the house and resolving the financial crisis that Emma caused. It's challenging, but we're making it work. We have not received any communication from Emma. She has my deepest sympathies, and I pray she is safe, but I can't shake the rage she inspired. Thanks to Mom's understanding, I'm able to keep up with my internship and freelancing job. Finding that sweet spot is going to take some time, but we're getting there. What is ahead is completely unknown to me. A part of me is still cautious, still trying to keep my emotions under check, but I also have hope. Perhaps this is the opportunity for a new beginning that our family has been seeking. For the time being, it suffices. It's not the happily ever after I had envisioned, but it is real. My stepbrother insisted that I leave the house during my stepfather's burial, believing it was his. Until the will revealed otherwise. 38-year-old Jake never imagined I would be getting ready for the burial of my stepfather. Memories sweep back like a tidal wave as I sit here organizing old pictures and planning. Death seems to cause one to consider a lifetime of events, both positive and negative. At 9 years old, my mother Sarah married Richard, my stepfather. The wedding day seems to me like yesterday. Mom looked lovely in her basic white outfit, hope beaming in her eyes for a fresh start. Richard, on the other hand, seemed to be stressing his austere attitude by wearing a black suit. Even on what ought to have been a happy occasion, he insisted on a solemn demeanor that I would come to know all too well over the years. Richard was a rigid man right from the beginning. Particularly when he turned to face me, he always seemed to be permanently frowning. Often I questioned whether he simply had the means to relate to a child who wasn't his own or if he harbored resentment at having to assume the position of stepfather. Growing up with Richard was not easy. From my grades to my wardrobe to even how I handled my fork at meals, he attacked everything I did. "You need to work harder, or this cruel world will chew you up and spit you out," he said almost daily. Looking back, I wonder if Dad was attempting to equip me for life in his own flawed manner. Even if at the time I believed he was just being nasty. His rigidity permeated every sphere of our life. I had to sit up straight, use the proper fork, and only spoke when spoken to during family get-togethers. Any departure from his expectations was greeted with a stinging stare or a harsh correction. Family vacations, which ought to have been light-hearted and leisureful, were more like military drills than pleasure excursions. Richard would schedule everything down to the last minute, heaven help us should we stray from the plan. One vacation I recall we missed a turn and arrived at a museum 15 minutes late. For the rest of the day Richard was in a terrible mood, grumbling about lost time and inadequate preparation. Everything changed 3 years following the wedding when my stepbrother Michael was born. Richard suddenly had his own son, and it was obviously clear whose favorite was. He poured love and compliments on Michael. Richard's smile was unlike anything I'd seen till he held his newborn kid. It revealed a part of Richard I never knew existed, like a switch had been turned on. I was envious and furious. When I was 12 years old, I couldn't comprehend why Michael received all the love and attention while I just got harsh looks and criticism. The difference was clear and agonizing. Michael's achievements, no matter little, were honored with great celebration. Even if they were notable, my own successes were greeted with a nod and a remark on how I can improve next time. Mom would try to reassure me when I protested to her about the unfair treatment. "Richard loves you too, Jake," she would say, her eyes begging me to understand. "That's just rough love. He wants you ready for the world." Still, it didn't feel like love to me. It seemed like continual disappointment as Richard saw me always failing. Our family dynamic changed in ways I never would have predicted throughout the years. Mom became ill at 25, and we all gathered around her. Richard stayed stoic even then, but I sensed compassion when he felt nobody else was looking. When Mom thought I wasn't in the room, I would observe him softly changing her pillows or crutching her hand. It was the first time I understood that Richard's lack of affection could have been more a result of his personal constraints than of his sentiments for us. 2 years later Mom passed away, and it felt as though the glue keeping our family intact had broken. Tears and quiet prayers defined the funeral. Richard stood like a monument all through the service, his face a blank mask. Though the wall between us seemed insurmountable, I wanted to get in touch with him to express our loss. Then 21 Michael left soon after Mom passed away. He launched his own family after tying the knot with Emma, his high school sweetheart. It was only me and Richard in that large mansion loaded with memories suddenly. I gave moving out some thought as well, but something held me back. Perhaps it was a feeling of obligation, or perhaps deep down I was still that small boy yearning some indication of approval from the guy who had been my father figure for most of my life. Looking after Richard in his latter years was difficult. Fighting the restrictions his aging body placed on him, he was as tenacious and critical as always. There were days when our conflict was so thick you could cut it with a knife. But occasionally too I felt short sparks of thanks in his eyes. Like the time I stayed up all night with him during a sick attack, or when I learnt to make his preferred foods as he grew too frail to stand at the stove himself. Those were uncommon events though, and most of the time I felt as though I was looking after a stranger who happened to live in my house. We were living in a tense truce, neither of us entirely sure how to close the distance that had widened between us over years. Richard's character made me never even consider entering a relationship or getting married. I wanted none of the same issues I was experiencing from my wife or girlfriend to confront. Richard's gone at 65, taken unexpectedly in the evening from a heart attack. Everyone is showing their respect as I get ready for his burial. Michael arrived with Emma and their children, Lily 5 years old and Max 3 years old. I hadn't seen him in years until now. Though he seems older and more austere, I recall from our early years that he exudes entitlement about everything. The funeral was a depressing event. I stood there listening to people talk about Richard, a fantastic man who always placed family first, a pillar of the community, and I wanted to find fun in the irony of it all. Knowing the same man I did they? To me, the Richard they described seemed to be a stranger. Michael drew me aside as folks were departing once it was all over. I considered that perhaps he wished to assist each other in our sadness, to reconnect, or to share memories of our childhood. Rather, he delivered a startling blow that left me whirling. "So, about the house," he said. His voice laid back as though we were talking about the temperature. "I'll need you to leave by the end of the month." "Not sure," I glanced at him. "What are you talking about?" He groaned and cast an intentionally obtuse glance at me. "Clearly, the house. Dad turned it over to me. Ultimately, I am his genuine son. You never imagined he would leave it to you?" I thought of myself as having been gutly pounded. This was how it turned out all these years of trying to be the son Richard wanted and of looking after him. Part of me wanted to fight for what I felt I had earned over years of conscientious living. But another side of me, the one still feeling like that 9-year-old lad yearning for affirmation, wanted to withdraw. "Fine," I answered, my voice empty. "I'll be out by the end of the month. Not only for Richard, but for the family I never really had, for the bond I had always hoped would grow between Richard and me but never did," as I watched Michael walk away arm around Emma, kids running ahead. That evening I began packing among boxes of memories I wasn't sure I wanted to save. Sorting through years of accumulated belongings, I couldn't help but wonder whether Richard had been right all along. Sometimes you still ended up with nothing to show for it. The world was harsh. Update: I sold out of my childhood house a week ago. For now, Mom's sister Linda is here with me trying to decide what to do next. Thinking about Michael and how we got here, I lie awake at night staring at the foreign ceiling. Michael obviously was the preferred child growing up. Richard doted on him in a way he never did with me from the time he was born. Birthday celebrations with all his friends invited, new toys just because, please smiles when he brought home a good report card, all things I had longed for but never received. I recall one birthday Michael was around 8 years old. Richard hired a whole arcade for his buddies and himself. At the time, I was 17 and couldn't help but contrast it with my own birthdays, which often featured a quiet meal and perhaps a small gift. But Michael aged and something changed. The sweet little lad who used to follow me about wanting to play developed into a depressed adolescent who appeared to hate everything and everyone. He started to treat me like I was invisible and spoke angrily back to our parents. It was like seeing a stranger seize my little brother's body. One specific occasion comes to mind when he was around 16. Richard asked us about his marks when we were having dinner. Richard asked us both this kind of inquiry all the time. It was a regular one. Michael burst this time though. He began screaming about how he despised living under Richard's control and how sick he felt of the pressure. He bolted from the house, slamming the door so fiercely a picture fell from the wall. Richard seemed to be sitting there, looking older and sadder than I had ever seen him. Instead of the angry man I had anticipated to pursue Michael and drag back. Michael's behavior just became worse as he grew older. He began courting a series of girls, each relationship ending hazily. Late nights, missing curfews, and shouting battles with Richard that rocked the home abound. I tried to keep out of it, but the continual stress would inevitably affect me. Michael laughed it off when Richard tried to discuss respect and duty. "You can't control me anymore," he would say, and Richard would get this expression, a mix of wrath and despair, that I had never seen before. Then arrived the day he turned up with Emma as his bride. Not even among us knew he was seeing someone seriously, let alone getting ready for marriage. Walking in with Emma, little more than a teenage herself, he said they had eloped. I shall never forget Richard's expression. For once, he was silent. Mom tried to calm things down and welcome Emma into the family, but the air was clearly charged. Richard seemed to be straining to keep his cool and to find the proper words to speak to his kid. Emma claimed she wanted to live free from family meddling, apart. Michael thus packed his luggage and left, simply as that. He pledged to visit and keep in touch, but those pledges soon dropped off the list. Weeks became months devoid of his communication. His calls were always quick and often tinged with conflict. I assumed definitely he would come back when Mom fell ill, but he did not. He asked her periodically how she was doing, but always had a reason for why he couldn't visit. Work was hectic, the kids were sick, the car was in the shop. Something was always there. Hoping it would be Michael, I recall sitting next Mom's hospital bed and seeing her eyes flash every time the phone rang. More usually than not, it wasn't. It was me who had to phone Mom to let her know she died. He sounded very offended, full of regret for not visiting more frequently. He claimed he would try to make it to the funeral, but ultimately he did not show up, just a flower arrangement delivered to the funeral house accompanied by a card offering his sympathies. Feeling his absence like a physical hurt, I stood at the burial wondering how we had become so far apart. And right now here we are. Not motivated by love or obligation, the prodigal son returns for what he can gain. Thinking about how he swooped in and grabbed the house, acting as though he had some right to do so when he had left us years earlier, makes me enraged. I consider all the evenings I spent seeing to Richard, all the doctor's visits I accompanied, all the meals I made, and all the expenses I paid. And for what? To be thrown aside just like I never really mattered at all. But my phone calls as I'm staggered in these terrible ideas. It is Mr. Thompson, Richard's attorney. Telling me he has to talk about something vital, he sounds serious and asks me to come back to the house tomorrow. Uncertain on what to believe. Part of me hopes there's a mistake and maybe I won't have to abandon my house after all. Knowing how let down I have been in the past, another side of me is terrified to hope. I wonder what tomorrow will hold as I hang up the phone. Whatever it is, I am clear one thing. This is not going to be easy. I toss and turn the remainder of the night, my head ablaze with possibilities. Something so crucial that Mr. Thompson had to see me personally. Richard left something for me after all. Is it conceivable? Alternatively, is this only another letdown in a long run of disappointments? Feeling like a stranger, I stood before my childhood house the next day. To my astonishment, Michael's car was also in the driveway already. Breathing deeply, I entered. The familiar creak of the front door sent a pulse through me. Sitting at the dining room table, Mr. Thompson had a stack of documents before him. There were Michael and Emma as well, clearly agitated. With his demeanor unreadable, the attorney motioned for me to sit down. Seated, well aware of the tension in the room. "Thank you all for coming," he said with a firm businesslike voice. "I know this is a tough period, but there are some crucial issues about Richard's will we should talk about." Michael slanted forward, a smug grin on his face. "Let's wrap this up. I would want to start right away as I have plans for this home." Mr. Thompson cleared his throat, seeming uncomfortable. "We should really talk about that. Richard's will states that Jake has been left the house and in fact all of his possessions." The room went still for a time. I felt as though I couldn't breathe. Had I heard him precisely? After all these years of believing I was never good enough, Richard had left everything to me. The first to react was Michael. "What?" he yelled, leaping to his feet so fast his chair dropped backwards. "That's not possible. Real son of his father is me. He wouldn't hand everything to Jake." Mr. Thompson stayed cool under Michael's rage. "I'm rather worried it's rather obvious. Richard's will specifically says that Jake is to inherit all of his possessions, including the house, his savings, and his personal items." What I was hearing defied belief. It seemed illogical. Those years of criticism, of feeling as though I could never measure up, and now this. Michael was pacing now, his face flushed with rage. "This is nuts. When he composed this, he must have been insane. I'll dispute it. I'll bring this before court." Mr. Thompson gave a headshake. "That is not what I would counsel. Richard prepared this will rather carefully. He included a letter outlining his choice and had it attested and notarized. Challenging effectively would be quite difficult." Michael turned to face me, his eyes flaming with resentment. "You did this, did not you? You somehow twisted him against me. Still in disbelief personally, I raised my hands. About any of this I knew nothing. I assumed he was forwarding everything to you. Before things could get much more heated, Mr. Thompson stepped in. If I may, I think Richard's letter might help to clarify his choice. Pulling out an envelope, he started to read. To his sons, should you be reading this, I am gone. Though I hope I can clarify, I know your two may find my choice shocking. I have made lots of mistakes over my life. Among my largest was not treating both of my sons equally in terms of love. I expected too much from Jake, was too demanding, never showed enough affection. And I treated Michael too kindly. I never set appropriate limits or imparted any lessons of value. As I considered my life in my last years, I came to see something crucial. A real son is defined by behavior rather than blood. And in that sense, Jake behaved as a real son ought to. He stayed with me through trying circumstances and looked after me even when I didn't deserve it. All the traits I attempted to teach but failed to show myself, patience, kindness and responsibility, he exhibited. I am so leaving everything to him, not as a punishment to Michael but rather as a tribute to the kid who really embodied the ideals I cherish. I hope you both have the compassion to see and pardon the errors of an elderly guy. The room went still once Mr. Thompson closed his book. Tears came to me, a lifetime of feelings rising inside me. All those years I felt Richard didn't care, that he considered me a disappointment. But he had been observing, noting, valuing in his own unique sense. Michael froze momentarily, his face a mask of shock and rage. Then he silently seized Emma's hand, rushed out, slammed the door behind him. His automobile started up and ran out of the driveway. The last act of disobedience was a tire screech. Turning to me, Mr. Thompson wore a gentle grin. I know this is a lot to absorb, Jake, he continued. Richard expressed his preferences quite precisely. He wished for you a safe future free from financial concerns. I nodded, still not sure I understood exactly what had transpired. Thank you, I managed to say. I need some time to consider all this. Mr. Thompson stopped as he neatly folded his documents. There is still one more item. Your stepfather left you a personal note as well. You read it in private, he questioned. He gave me an envelope with my name written in Richard's recognizable handwriting on it. I took it knowing that within our words I had waited a lifetime to hear with shaky hands. I sat by myself in the quiet house flipping the envelope in my hands after Mr. Thompson departed. At last I plucked the will to open it and read. Jake dear, though I know I've never been excellent at communicating my emotions, hopefully this letter will help to offset some of my faults. I'm glad of the man you have evolved into. Though I failed as a parent, I had a challenging upbringing and never taught appropriate affectionate behavior. I reasoned that the best way to equip you for life was to be rigorous and challenge you. I regret the suffering I caused you. Now I understand I was mistaken. Particularly in these last several years, your compassion and commitment have shown me what actual strength and integrity look like. You now more than ever reflect the guy I always dreamed you would be. I apologize for not telling you these things when I was living. With my last wishes and this letter, maybe, you will have some peace and protection. Remember yourself, son. You are deserving of all the joy available. Love, Richard. Tears came down my face as I closed the book. All those years of feeling inadequate, of thinking Richard didn't care, and now this was overpowering. Over the next days I battled to make sense of everything. Once a cause of stress and bad memories, the house felt different now. It belonged to me, in a deeper sense as much as legally. It was evidence of Richard's affection, sincere if spoken too late. Michael hasn't gotten in touch since he departed that day. Not sure whether he will. Though I know it will take time, part of me hopes we can reconcile someday. The pain is still raw, and our distance seems more than it did years ago. I have given family, the complexity of love and the numerous ways people show it a lot of thought. Though often harsh, Richard's love was sincere. It was flawed. In his own sense, he was working to equip me for life and build my resilience. Though I wish he could have discovered a softer approach, I now better understand him. Regarding inheritance, it goes beyond just money and real estate. One has responsibility. Richard trusted me to continue on his legacy and to live the ideals he loved. Although it's a difficult work, I'm resolved to meet expectations. I have chosen to create a scholarship fund in Richard's name from a portion of the bequest. It's for children from difficult situations so they may have the education and chances they might otherwise miss. Taking the teachings he imparted on me and paying them forward seems like the proper approach to honor his memory. I'm still trying to make sense of everything as I sit here now in the house that turned unexpectedly into mine. Fathers and sons have a complex relationship marked by frequently unsaid feelings and misunderstandings. Richard and I never had the relationship I wanted when he was alive, but his last act has given me an opportunity to better know him, to see the love always there, buried under the surface. I wish Dad had told me these things during his lifetime. We could have had talks, cleared the air, perhaps even created the relationship I so yearned for. But life does not always provide us tidy ends or flawless closure. Right now, I'm concentrating on respecting Richard's memory by practicing the ideals he sought to inculcate in me. Work hard, be conscientious, and most importantly, love those who matter. I'm glad to be carrying on a legacy. Looking ahead, I experience a range of emotions: sadness for what was lost, thankfulness for what I have, and hope for what is to come. Richard's unexpected legacy has given me a fresh perspective of family, love, and forgiveness in addition to financial stability. Though I never expected it, this is a new chapter in my life and I am ready to face it, bearing with me the lessons of the past and hope for a better future. That might ultimately be the best inheritance of all. Wife left me looking after my dying father, but she returned crawling after Dad made me a millionaire in his bequest. Married for 8 years, I am a 36-year-old man with 2 children. I also am the sole son of my sick father. You know, my dad has been dealing with renal issues for many years. Unfortunately, his condition has gotten worse over the past 2 to 3 years and he now requires twice-weekly dialysis. He could drive on his own earlier, but during the past year he usually asked me to go with him. He is becoming weaker daily as well. I had developed a schedule for myself whereby I would be dialysing my father every time. I do not want to abandon him under this state by himself. He needs to go for dialysis 2 days a week, hence I scheduled Saturday and Wednesday. I have Saturday off from work, hence it is not a problem. My supervisor gave me permission to go early on Wednesday, and then I worked late into the night after dialysis to make up the missing hours. After 10 years of employment with this organization, my supervisor has viewed me as a dedicated and devoted worker, hence, giving this particular authorization was not really important to him. Still, the issue started at home with my 34-year-old wife Ail. She became irate when she learned that I will be on dialysis twice a week bringing my dad. She was not happy when I used to take him sometimes, but she never voiced her annoyance directly. She couldn't stop herself now that I had taken up the conscientious responsibility. She claimed that wasting my time on my father was useless as, whatever I did, he would never be impressed by me. Here's a bit of background to this then. My dad runs a merchandise company. He had obtained some reasonable wealth and was rather off. I was driven about something else while he wanted me to run his company. I was drawn to technology. Creating software and programming excited me. I thus pursued a software degree after school, whereas Dad wanted me to study administration or business. He was still good with that as long as I was ready to work for his business. But once I graduated, I started working for a well-known IT company. Dad objected to me working for someone else instead of carrying on his legacy. I stalled as he insisted on having me join his company. When Dad asked me one more time whether I wanted to join after my marriage, I answered no. Dad lost it and declared he would donate all of his fortune to charity and that I would not get a penny. I stayed exactly at my choice. You see, I was doing nicely even at that age. At 29 I purchased my own house and a car. Even without his fortune, I felt rather sure I could lead a reasonable existence. I explained to him I could create wealth on my own and I didn't need his money. Our relationship broke down after that. Mom died from heart arrest 5 years ago. For Dad, it was just terrible. You know, I left the house at 17 for college, then I found work and began living alone. Dad only had Mom as his friend. Losing her would be the most terrible thing he could go through. That is when our relationship was restored. I used to take my children to play with him and started paying regular visits to him. He finally left his company and handed it to a trust to run. Ail, my wife, never hung around my parents. Ail avoided visiting my mother while she was still living, claiming that she was overly intrusive in our life and that they did not get along. Ail started candidly berating my parents for being nasty and evil when my father declared he would take me off his will. She always intervened, claiming that it would damage our future, particularly our children's, so she stayed out of my connection with my parents. She was not ready to accept that our future, that of our children, was safe regardless of Dad's wealth. Now, considering the existing circumstances, Ail became agitated when she learned I would be accompanying Dad twice a week for dialysis. I tried first to explain to her that Dad only had me. Long ago he lost his parents. Although he has an elder brother, he lives on the opposite side of the city and hardly visits. Since Mom passed away, Dad has grown quite lonely. In this state, I cannot leave him. But my wife finds this difficult to grasp. She has lately made my life unpleasant. She comes up with some agenda every Saturday. Either deep cleaning, throwing a party at the house, outing the kids, or something as little as grocery shopping. She could schedule anything she wanted on Sundays, I said, since on Saturdays I have to pick Dad for dialysis. She then later chastises me for being late or missing them, yet she keeps with her plans. I have to dash to pick up my dad, drive him to the dialysis center, then drop him back home. I then get home to see Elle's sarcasm and outbursts. Not only on Saturdays? She also does the same on Wednesday evenings. Late in the evening or at night after dialysis, I had promised my supervisor that I would make up the missed work hours. Elle, though, always has a scheme to annoy me. She would leave the duty of our children to me almost every Wednesday night, meeting her relatives, catching up with long-lost friends, or going to some haphazard party. After a busy day at the dialysis center, I have to balance my work, prepare for the children, feed the smaller one and somehow finish my outstanding chores. My dad advised me several times to let him accompany the nurse to the center as he notices me always rushing and tensely staring at my watch. I drop him home and hardly wait a second before sprinting back. I ask him to be ready and wait outside before I come even when we are picking him up. Although Dad has a full-time nurse and caregiver to look after him, I still feel guilty about not spending time with him. His dwelling to the center takes 30 minutes of drive. I used to like talking to him during such drive in past times, remembering the better days. But with Aile's outbursts rising, all I can think about is running back home. To shorten the journey time, I most of the time am overspeeding my automobile in traffic, using shortcut lanes, and passing other cars. This is the only time I spend with Dad. Hence I don't want to damage or stop it by asking him to accompany the nurse. As a son, I too have some duties. Simply said, I cannot tolerate this woman anymore. Updated 1. It is simply growing worse daily. Not one stone is left unturned by my wife to discourage me from visiting my father. She makes the argument that it is a lost cause. Dad has already taken me out of his will and donated his riches to charity, hence there is no use in wasting time and effort for him. I am not sure I understand her. Do we act merely in line with profit and loss? What if someone's parents are impoverished or lack any fortune? Given little to contribute, do their children abandon them? I finally told her she wasn't going to inherit anything from her parents after listening to her outbursts for so many months. Why then does she visit her folks every now and then? She lost it at this, "Oh my God," then declared, "My parents accomplished a lot more than your selfish father. They helped me in many aspects. They are not like your father, who turned on you for not working for his company. You dare compare my parents to yours? My father would have never done that to me." This kind of confrontation happens virtually every Wednesday and Saturday when I get back from dialysis. It is not only a one-time occurrence at my house. With every incident, it gets more intense and ugly. She used to argue with me alone earlier, but right now I watch her screaming and yelling at me in front of the kids. Not only that, I have heard her disparaging my dad in front of our kids and using them against my dad. I intervened when I heard this, which resulted in still another nasty argument between us. For me, Aile's battles now become a ritual. I sense something is lacking on the days she doesn't fight, just for her to get more hostile the following day. Now I nearly gave up on her. I simply ignore her as though she doesn't exist. I don't yell back or answer her. Apart from what else ought I to do? I cannot give my father up to satisfy her. If he booted me out of his will, it makes no difference. He kicked me due of my own choice. I turned down his offer to work for his company, and he had to turn up his hard-earned company to a trust. It must have demoralized him rather severely. To my dad, that firm was like a baby. He had to donate it to someone else. Having offended him, he had every right to disown me. Sometimes I feel as though my hurting my dad is causing karma to bite me back. Dad, on the other hand, is growing frail. He requires assistance to step down to the automobile. He is hardly able to walk on his own. I used to ask him to drop him off outside the home so I could save time. But right now, I'm not bothered about being late. I enter to gently lead him to the car, then drop him off to rest soundly in his bed. He is also having dyspnea, so I walk him as slowly as he requires. I drive deliberately, avoiding overspeeds to maintain his heart rate steady. Getting home late now doesn't bother me. Rushing home was useless. If I have to deal with that awful woman, why not at least make Dad happy? My casual attitude has made things worse. Yesterday, Aile told me I had to decide between her dad or myself. Seeing his condition, it didn't seem like Dad had long left. I attempted to explain to her that Dad wasn't going to be with us forever. Her response was short. In that case, you need to make your choice carefully. Someone who is going to be with you forever or someone who is going to die soon. This was quite callous. You know what? I said to her. I pick my dad more wisely than you, who is so selfish and nasty to a dying man. She got ready and left her baggage. I also wanted some distance from her and she needed some time to calm off. I did not stop her. I am tending to the house, my kids, Dad, and my work while she is away. Still, I feel so calmed down and relieved. Actually, her absence helps me to relax. She sent divorce paperwork to me the day before yesterday. Though I was somewhat expecting it, I did not imagine it would happen so quickly. Though surprised, deep down I was glad and relieved. I merely signed the paperwork and returned them. I did not phone her. She obviously didn't want the kids, but surprisingly she didn't ask for custody of them. That was the one stipulation I worried about. She screamed back, "How could you just sign it without calling me and pleading with me?" When she got the documents. Funny, right? Her mother then grabbed the phone and yelled that I should have behaved like a man and attempted to calm my wife back into the marriage rather than merely signing the paperwork. It was funny. Why would I do that? I went along since she wanted a divorce. I could say, it was good for me, I got rid of her without a fuss. I also mocked her, pointing out she didn't want her children and even gave them up. She indicated I could have all my possessions, including my 2 children. She did not want any of it. Her mother also mentioned that Ayil was still young and did not want children weighing on her shoulders. I answered, fine by me. Having my children around me makes me happy. Though it relieves me, I am concerned about my kids. They, especially the younger one, miss their mother. It's tough for me to handle all the obligations by myself when I'm at the office, but perhaps I'll be able to sail through this. Update 2. This will be a shorter update. I followed my kids to Dad's place. It's a fantastic idea, and I have to say, thanks to everyone for the amazing concept. It went exactly. All of us benefited from moving in with Dad. Dad brought my kids along, and they played with their grandfather. Why didn't Dad have a full-time caretaker ready to look after my kids for a payoff? The finest deal is someone to look after my kids under Dad's direction. Seeing Dad playing and laughing with my kids and them having fun with their grandfather makes me very happy. Ayil saw not what was ahead. By divorcing me, she aimed to ruin my life. She believed I would not be able to manage all the obligations, looking after the kids, my dad, the house and business. But everything is just exactly as it should be. I am most sure laughing last. The divorce was the best thing ever, LOL. Update 3. The news is depressing. Dad died last week in sleep. After playing with my kids, he went to bed pleased and glad and never woke up again. The doctor said he passed away quietly. Dad was delighted after I moved in with him, according to the doctor, his nurse, and even his caregiver. This somewhat extended his lifetime. Before I moved in, he was already almost giving up. Losing your only parent is quite difficult, but I'm happy he could live the last few months of his life contentedly. Although my kids are quite depressed to lose him, Dad has taught them solid values. Grandpa used to urge them to embrace reality and go on. Life never pauses for anybody. Hearing such outstanding things from them makes me very proud. In this period of hopelessness, they are really my strength. One more startling news item, nevertheless, followed Dad's death. Dad's attorney got in touch with me and asked me to visit his office to unveil his intention. I responded it wasn't necessary. Dad had previously told me he had given all his fortune to the trust, so I was fine with that and advised the attorney he should move forward with the papers to transfer everything to them. Assuming it also applied to the charitable trust, I asked him whether I should leave Dad's house. Laughing at me, he instructed me to just drop over. The trust members were already present when I visited. The lawyer had also phoned them. I started crying when the attorney began to pursue the will. Actually, Dad had willed me as his heir. All his property, business and wealth was for me. Thinking he might have done it after I started looking after him, I questioned the lawyer whether this was done recently. The attorney grinned and stated the will was never changed. I was always his heir. I was in tears. My dad never left me. Perhaps he threatened to disown me so I might honor his business and heritage. Dad's attorney calmed me, but I was still crying. I stated it kills me inside since I hurt my dad all his life, but he always cared for me. The attorney claimed that Dad was really quite happy that I was ready to sacrifice family riches in order to follow my passion under his influence. Dad gave me much pride. The attorney indicated that for now I am the business's decision maker and that, should I so wish, I could remove the company from the trust and operate it myself. I could be doing that. I pursued whatever I wanted to accomplish and Dad subtly encouraged me. It is now my time to reimburse him. I'm considering reversing it from the trust and scaling it to the level Dad envisioned for his company to reach. Telling my kids about their grandfather's will when I got home, to be received once my children become 18, he has also bequeathed some of his fortune to them. We visited his tomb today bearing some flowers and rested in peace for some time. For me, this is a somewhat emotional stage. Update 4. You know how quickly ants swarm when they spot sugar candy? I started running Dad's company and other community service projects 1 month following his death. I first resigned from my employment and assumed running of the company. Then, since my kids and I elected to reside at my parents' place, I leased my house. I also desire not to leave this house since it preserves my childhood memories and they feel linked to their grandpa here. I received numerous guests at my house, long-lost relatives, acquaintances, and neighbors, after learning I had inherited the $1 million fortune of my father. Still, my ex-wife Al and her parents were the most unexpected guests. Sobbing, they came inside the house claiming they would have gone to the funeral but they didn't know about my father's death. Her parents then praised my dad in all the right ways. Al kissed the kids and wept over how much she missed them. If she missed them so much, I asked her, why did she not visit them during the past 7 or 8 months? She claimed to have gone to our house but found it locked. What a deception it is. I asked, weren't you concerned for your kids upon learning the house was locked? Did you not think it essential to get in touch and see whether the children were all right? She gave no response. Let us forget whatever has happened in the past, her parents urged next. The kids will be left by themselves in the house when I'm at work now that my father is dead. It would be better if we reconciled since they need a mother. At this advice, I laughed in their faces. When she left her children to me, they most needed her. The kids have become used to her absence now, hence I do not want her back into my life. She began to weep. Her parents left us by ourselves. She begged for reconciliation while holding my hands. She missed seeing the kids and claimed she loved me. Laughing, I said, you know what? You cherish the fortune my dad left behind, not me. Here at my door you and your avaricious parents are here to drain off my money. Using those words for her parents is what they are, thus I have no regrets about it. During our divorce, she also called my dad unpleasant and avaricious. I could not have let this woman get 1 penny of my dad's hard-earned money. She became offended when I denigrated her parents. She stated till now she was begging me as she loved me, but now she would take what was rightly hers. She didn't ask for any alimony during the divorce, but now she wants half of my dad's fortune, rather, half of my wealth. She could do whatever she wanted, I told her. I'll destroy her but not pay her a penny. She fled after mistreating me. I explored this with my attorney regarding the potential. Her prospects were, he said, few. A year before I inherited anything, the divorce was settled. She couldn't get anything anyway since the kids were with me. He cautioned me, though, about having her spend time with the kids. She might control them, file for their custody, then later on demand money for their upkeep and all that. I would like to thank him most especially for this counsel. I will oversee their meetings. These days, I also spend a lot of time with the children helping them to deal with the loss so they won't rush to their mother for emotional support. Having taken over my dad's business allows me great freedom to balance my personal life and well-being. The kids and I are going to have a Bahamas holiday. Really, why not? They are due this extravagant trip. No, it has nothing to do with overspending Dad's fortune. I could have gone too, but I had to balance my job and Dad's care earlier and lacked the time. I wanted to take them out now that I could. Regarding Aile, she hasn't got in touch with me since her most recent trip. She is probably busy suing me from every lawyer's office, knocking on every one of them.